So we are already in session from our earlier closed session meeting. So I will ask us to say the Pledge of Allegiance at this time. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. So we do have a student and staff recognition tonight. So this is our Spirit of Excellence Award segment. It is a time where we recognize the outstanding individuals who are truly making an impact in our district. Tonight, that group is, we are recognizing a group for their work to provide fresh food and to district families in 2 areas of the city. Under the leadership of after-school coordinator Judith King, the district's full-service schools program provides additional family supports and community engagement at 4 schools: Walbridge, Oak Hill, Yateman-Liddell, and Vashon. In December 2019, Laura Fallon of Oak Hill took the initiative to partner with the St. Louis Area Food Bank to establish a mobile food mart for the Oak Hill community. A few months later, in March 2020, Diamond Car of Walbridge followed suit, bringing the program to the Walbridge community. Participating families received bi-weekly grocery boxes with items including cereal, fruit, vegetables, meat, and milk. Since December, the Oak Hill Mobile Food Mart has provided groceries to more than 1,500 families, 6,700 individuals, and 3,200 children. Walbridge Elementary has served more than 1,200 families, 5,400 individuals, and 3,100 children. In addition, the full-service program provided food stamp and utility assistance during these events. Tonight, we recognize Laura Fallon and Diamond Car for their work to connect their schools with their communities. A special thanks also to the Student Support Services staff, district social workers, schools custodians, safety officers, and community volunteers for assisting with packaging and grocery distribution. So thank you all for your hard work. Okay, so we do have 3 sets of minutes to approve. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from March 31st, 2020?
I'd like to make the motion that we accept the minutes from March 31st, 2020.
I'll second. Questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts,
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Is there a motion to approve the April 14th, 2020 minutes?
Second. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll make the motion that we accept the April 14th, 2020 minutes.
I'll second. And Natalie's here on video also. No, you are. I'm sorry. You are. We'll make sure you get it on this one. Ms. Bell, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Ms. Bowell,
We lost her video stream, so we'll come back, just have her, we'll just come back to that.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. Is there a motion to approve the April 28th, 2020 minutes?
I'd like to make the motion that we accept the April 28th, 2020 minutes.
I'll second. Questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Ms. D. Jones,
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Lane,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
You have Ms. Bowell.
She's connecting to audio or to video right now, I believe. Yes, she's back. So we're voting on the April 20th, 2020 minutes.
Sorry, was I called for the March meeting?
You were not. I neglected to have Ms. Bell call you.
Okay, I'm confused. Can I vote yes?
So right now we're voting on the April 20th set of minutes.
Okay. Yes.
Vote is yes. Thank you.
Ms. Rhodey Collins.
Yes.
Motion passed.
So since I neglected to have Ms. Val called for the March 31st minutes, could she vote for that at this time? Ms. Bell, could you recall the vote on the March 31st minutes, please?
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowell?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes,
Motion passed.
thank you. So Natalie, you are off video for the April 14th.
Okay. Do you want me to vote those or?
Ms. Bell, will you recall the roll on the April 14th?
Ms. D. Jones?
So I asked Ms. Bell to recall the roll for April 14th since Ms. Bell had issues with her video.
I'm having a hard time hearing. I don't know about anybody else. It's kind of low. So yes.
Thank you. Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowell? Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes, thank you. So at this time, we will have the superintendent's report. Dr. Adams, would you like to introduce the speakers?
Good afternoon. First of all, good evening. We're now 20 days away from the first day of the 2020-2021 school year, which is Monday, August the 31st. We understand that families may have questions about what school will look like and how the all virtual start is going to go. And obviously, we have a presentation tonight that will hopefully clarify some of that. We've established a section on the website that will hopefully answer your questions as well as what's happening tonight. For additional help, we have set up a call center for families which can be accessed by calling 314-345-5656. The call center is staffed from 8 until 3 Monday through Friday. The first day of school, the first week of school, the call center will have extended hours from 7 until 5. Again, that number is 345-5656 with the prefix 314. Starting the week of the 24th will be our technology distribution, which I'll cover a little bit in my presentation as well, and school supplies to assist students with virtual learning. Families will hear from their schools regarding pickup of those items, so please stay tuned for that information. At this point in time, we have several presentations. The first presentation is a presentation from Chad. Dr. Michael Brown with Student Support Services has invited two presenters tonight. One is here, so we're going to ask the representative from CHADS to come to the podium and start the presentation. First of all, thank you very much for being here tonight, and the board may have some questions after your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Colleen Pace. I'm the program director for CHADS Coalition for Mental Health. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some of our services and specifically the services that we provide in the St. Louis Public Schools school district. Okay? Dr. Cal Spinks is our family support program manager, so he oversees our clinicians and therapists that work with your students. He was originally supposed to be here, but I'm here in his place, so just for some clarification. Okay? So what we know is that in the St. Louis metro area, 1 in 5 students attempt suicide every year. That's about 1 out of every classroom, or 1 in 18 students. We know that 1 in 5 adolescents struggle with a mental health issue of some sort, and about 33% of those mental health issues start to manifest during adolescent years, during those teenage years. Chad is our namesake. He was a wonderful young man. He was involved in Eagle Scouts. He was a straight A student. Everybody thought that Chad was perfect. But unfortunately, he had a really big secret. About October of his senior year of high school, he was talking with his girlfriend and confessed that he was having thoughts of suicide, that he was thinking of ending his life. This was a huge shock to his parents, Marion and Larry McCord. They immediately got him the help that he needed. They took him to a doctor where he was diagnosed with depression, bipolar disorder, and OCD. One of the things that came up while Chad was in treatment was that he had been having thoughts of suicide since he was in 3rd grade. He was 8 years old when he first started thinking of hurting himself. Unfortunately, Chad did lose his battle with depression in April of 2004. He was about 1 month away from graduating from high school. But Marion and Larry knew that they needed to do something more, that they needed to help other kids like Chad. And so they founded CHADS Coalition in 2005. We've grown quite a bit over the years, and I'm happy to say that especially in the more recent years, we've been able to provide services throughout the entire metro area and specifically here in St. Louis City. We have 3 main programs. Signs of Suicide is an evidence-based classroom education program where we educate students on the warning signs and symptoms of depression and suicide, and most importantly, how to get help for themselves or a friend. We also screen them for depression and get them connected with a school counselor that same day that our presenter is in the building so that they can get help as soon as possible. Our social and emotional well-being programming is based on the CASEL competencies and focuses on mentoring with our students. So students that are struggling with social and emotional relationships, that are struggling with bullying and other peer relationships, that might have behavior problems in schools, we connect them with a trained mentor where they can work through the CASEL competencies to learn how to better interact with their peers and how to thrive in the school environment and even in their communities. And then finally, family support. Family support is the clinical arm of our agency. We have licensed and provisionally licensed clinicians on staff that see students on a short-term basis, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that looks like in a second. But what we know is that the wait list for a child psychologist is anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on where you live and how much money you have. There's a huge barrier to services. And so at our agency, we try to step in and be that stopgap, try to get student services as early as possible so they don't have to wait 6 weeks or 6 months or even longer. We're also able to provide those services at low or ideally no cost to parents and families so that the child can continue to see their therapist for as long as they need to. So in the St. Louis area, or in St. Louis public schools, we've provided SOS presentations, our signs of suicide presentations in 6 schools, mentoring in 2 schools, and our therapeutic services in 4 schools over the past few years. Specifically this past school year, we provided therapeutic services in Kamoja and Roosevelt High School. So what does this therapy look like? I mentioned that it's brief, it's very short term, relatively short term. We typically see students for anywhere from 8 to 12 sessions, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, depending on the needs of the student. But it's brief and solution focused. It typically involves safety planning. We do assessments at every single session to see where they're falling, to see if we need to do a deeper risk assessment is what it's called. And we work closely with the school guardian as well as the parents and families to make sure that they're involved in the treatment process as well. Okay. Obviously, over the past 6 months, a lot of those have changed. We typically would assign a therapist to be in a school 1 day a week and see a caseload of anywhere from 4 to 7 students. Not being in school, schools being closed, we haven't been able to see clients face to face, but we very quickly created our what we are calling telebehavioral health programming. So we're able to provide the same services, but in a virtual format. So we're seeing clients using a HIPAA compliant platform. Either Theranest is what we're using internally, but Doxy.me is the other platform that many different agencies are using. And we're able to continue providing those services. What's great about this is that it allows for a lot more flexibility moving into this next school year so that we can see students if they're in the classroom or in the building physically, we can still see them from a virtual standpoint if buildings aren't allowing visitors. Or if it doesn't work for the school day, we can see clients outside of the regular school day as well. So there's a lot more flexibility with the telebehavioral health platform. Okay. About 70% of our clients see a reduction in symptoms of depression and anxiety, and 75% of them see a reduction in suicidal ideation. So we use these evidence-based methods and modalities to help treat our clients, get them out of that crisis. They can move on to longer term care if they need it, or hopefully they're out of that crisis, at least for the time being. And if something comes up again, they can always call us back. Okay. I think these are some of our resources. I talked fairly quickly, but we love working with the students in St. Louis Public Schools. We're very excited to continue our partnership in this upcoming school year, especially with our new telebehavioral health platform. Okay. Are there any questions?
First of all, thank you very much. Are there any questions directed to our speaker tonight?
Go ahead, Don.
Yes, I'd like to know what type of information are you going to put out there virtually so that parents will understand that there is that CHAD is there for their students that might be going through something, because I know the pandemic has caused a lot of anxiety in the community. and a lot of parents are looking for help, and they don't understand sometimes where they can find that help. So how are you going to do that? Because you said you were servicing up to 4 to 7 students.
A caseload for one school is anywhere from 4 to 7 students, ideally 7 students. But that's only what we get from a specific school. So we still take clients outside of that, if that makes sense. It's funding and connected with our grants. So we're always taking new clients, but if they're referred from a school, typically we will take up to 7. That was when we were embedded in the school. Now that we're on telebehavioral health, that looks a lot different, if that makes sense.
So do you have a standard description of what a parent can look for in their child to, if they are sensing that something might be wrong with their student mentally, or they're going through something?
Sure, absolutely. Would you like me to list them right now? Okay.
Yes, I would, please.
Okay, absolutely. So what's difficult about teenage depression is that it can sometimes appear as though it's just typical teenage behavior. So changes in sleeping patterns, changes in eating habits, mood swings. Some of those are really, really hard to differentiate from just a teenager being a teenager and somebody that's struggling with a little bit more. Something that could be depression or anxiety. And so it's important to keep those things in mind, that if you're seeing severe changes in mood, if they're not sleeping, if they seem more angry and irritable than usual, and if your child just in general is not appearing to be themselves. So I always say that we're parents, we know our kids, we know in our gut what their baseline personality is. And if you're starting to see a shift or a change in that personality, that's when we want to have a conversation about what's going on with them. It might not be as severe as depression, but it's always better to ask and to have that conversation than to just assume that it's nothing or just write it off as typical teenage behavior. As I said at the beginning, 1 in 5 kids struggle with a mood disorder or a mental health disorder. And so it's important to have those conversations to learn more about what's going on with them. Does that answer that question for you?
Hey, Colleen, thank you for coming. And I just want to first gratitude before the question, express gratitude for not only what CHADS does, but also where you do it. I know in a lot of our communities, mental health is not something that's prioritized. So I know particularly with SOS being able to inform the students as well on what are the signs of suicide and depression, and what are all the myths that, and you all are able to debunk that. My question, I know it's going to be tough moving to this virtual format and having that same impact, but I trust that you all can do that. My question is just around COVID-19 and looking at special circumstances where we have students who are, not used to, if the home environment is an environment that is not healthy and is contributing exponentially to their lack of positive mental health, if you all are taking a different approach due to COVID-19 to address specific COVID-19 related causes or influences of depression and mental health?
Certainly. So I can definitely say that it will inform treatment, whatever specifically is impacting a client or a student that we're working with. So obviously everything that's going on in the world, not even just COVID-19, but everything else is certainly going to impact how we treat that student. If the home environment is not a safe place, and we know unfortunately for a lot of kids, home is not a safe place for them, that's where we want to work with the school counselors and the community partners that we have to hopefully come up with an embedded telebehavioral health, so the child still has a space to go that is safe and safe for them to engage in the therapeutic process or to have a trusted adult that they can talk with. So certainly though, we're still at the beginning stages of those processes just because of where we are and just only learning within the last few weeks officially that schools are not going to be in person. We're still building those bridges to talk about what that looks like specifically. But it is absolutely on our radar, just knowing that these kids can't be at home sometimes. So thank you for that question. That was a great question.
Are there additional questions at this time? We want to thank you very much for coming out and being here tonight. We look forward to the continued relationship with you as Mr. Lang said, this virtual world we're in. So thank you very much for being here tonight. And thank you for your services.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Our second presentation tonight is Stop the Bleed. Dr. Punch, I'm sorry, is here tonight. And so we'll ask her to come to the podium, please. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here tonight.
Can you hear me now? Oh, okay, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I'm Dr. Punch. I am a trauma surgeon, and I have been working with Mr. Brown for the last year with creating a plan to bring Stop the Bleed to St. Louis Public Schools. And I just want to explain a little bit about what the project is and what meaning I think it could have for the youth that are in your school district. So this is a picture that some of you might recognize. Anyone recognize it? This is the 20 children and 6 administrators whose lives were lost in December 2012 in Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut. After that event, a tragic event, a trauma surgeon at the University of Connecticut, a trauma surgeon who actually taught me in medical school at UConn, created the National Stop the Bleed campaign by bringing together a consensus of trauma surgeons, law enforcement, military, and other public health experts asking one question, which is, what could be done so less people died in mass shootings? What did they come up with? Was it to have more hospitals, more ambulances, or more blood? No, it was to train the public how to respond to bleeding, the same way our country 60 years prior decided to teach people how to respond to life-threatening bleeding and cardiac events by teaching the Heimlich maneuver and CPR. The thing is, while those decisions, even our own state of Missouri have made publicly for our high school students, requiring 30 minutes of CPR training in order for a student to graduate, those kinds of events in no way represent the kind of threat that injury represents to the lives of our children. Injury is the #1 cause of death in people aged 1 to 44. Nothing takes the lives of people in that age range more than trauma. And bleeding is the #1 preventable cause of that death. Nothing can modify what happens after injury more than stopping the bleed. And so this is a primary concern for students, for young people. Today is my birthday, so I am now no longer in that group. I just turned 45, but you get me, you feel me. This is super important. So this class is a 1-hour hands-on class in which people learn an ABC 1, 2, 3 approach to preventing life-threatening bleeding from taking someone's life. The A stands for alert, which means getting help on the way. There's nothing that takes the place of professional medical help. So teaching how to get that response is very, very important. B is for bleeding. That's finding where the bleeding is and keeping someone calm, warm, and flat while you're doing those things. When someone starts bleeding, it can be really overwhelming, especially if bleeding occurs on one of these blood highways. You only have 5 to 6 liters of blood in you. So by the time that the amount that's in your bottle of water is gone, you're already in shock and potentially facing death. And then C, 3 ways to stop the bleed once you have found it and gotten help along the way. That makes up the ABC 1, 2, 3 stop the bleed approach. This is a class that when I first heard about it, I thought represented a Band-Aid and an inappropriate response to the issues that are facing cities like ours, which include an enormous amount of violence and many, many lives lost. That was before me and my organization over the last 2 years taught 8,000 people how to stop the bleed and discovered that when you teach people how to do this ABC 1, 2, 3, you're teaching them much more than how to put on a tourniquet or pack a wound with gauze. You're teaching them that they have the power to become helpers and impact the lives of themselves, their loved ones, and people around them. That is a game-changing message that our youth usually don't get. We tell them what they shouldn't do. We tell them what we should do, but we don't often give them the opportunity to be better. And I find that Stop the Bleed training and certification and how to help changes attitudes. I don't just think that, I know that. We have done research looking at willingness to act and the emotional response to traumatic events by showing people videos of gunshot wounds and then having them take our class and then reassessing their feelings and emotions and capacity to act after the class. And we know that it fundamentally changes people's attitudes and feelings about how they can withstand and be present and help in the setting of trauma. We know that last summer, when I first asked the board to consider this, many of our children had been lost. And unfortunately, we have broken records again this summer with an unimaginable amount of people losing their lives to bullets in July. And no doubt we will have children coming back to school with, again, an enormous amount of trauma. So the thing about it is, it's not enough to just teach someone how to physically respond. We must bring into mind their own stress response, their own trauma response, if they have been exposed to those events. The second part of the class that we have asked for the school board to consider us teaching and that we have the MOU around is not just Stop the Bleed, but the second part of our class, which is How to Heal. How to Heal brings to attention the trauma response after being exposed to a stressful event like seeing someone shot, and gives students super simple ways of mitigating that trauma response in themselves, primarily through breath work. Now, if you can believe it, we can actually accomplish this training virtually in about 45 minutes. It only scratches the surface, but it begins to introduce these really important ideas to people. How do I know? It's because this summer, because of COVID, I've had to change our mode of operation, and we've now hosted 3 or 4 virtual classes, and we've really been excited about the way in which the virtual setting actually is allowing us to reach even more people than we reached before. We had been concerned that because this is typically a 1-hour hands-on class, there's no way we could accomplish it this year, or at least for the rest of this calendar year, and we'd have to look at a time when in-person gatherings were more safe. Now we know that actually virtual learning might be an even better way to get this material across and to assure that as many of the SLPS high schoolers that we can get access to this training. So I want to show you how we would do this really quickly. This is what I would need to get to the youth. There is some physical stuff that I need to have in their hands. What's in this thing? First of all, it's a very simple wound model that's just a pool noodle. That's literally pennies. It gives an example of how to compress and pack. And then second, I need something in their hands that they can use to compress or pack that maybe even is something they might enjoy having for the future. So here we've got a simple Band-Aid, bandana, which again is pennies. With these two things, I can teach youth a lot about how to think about and manage life-threatening bleeding. That class can be accomplished, as I said, in about a 30-minute virtual setting if they have these two things in their hand. Now, the second part of the training, which will be more challenging and perhaps we'll have to wait for a later time, is a training that involves using the tourniquet. I don't have the tourniquet with me, but basically, that training does involve hands-on, and I would actually save that for the seniors anyway, because that's a much more significant kind of training. But I would want everyone who wants it, especially teachers, to have access to it as it is safe to physically gather. And then the third part would be just the how to heal part. And what we do is really simple. We provide everyone with a lava rock bracelet and a dab of essential oil, and we teach people how to do breath work with this. And you simply put it on your wrist, And 2 or 3 times a day, you pass it by your nose, you take some deep breaths, and you recenter yourself. Again, these things might be small, but this is the beginning of giving our youth tools to respond to the real life incidents and trauma that they're dealing with in their lives. Finally, as we are able to with funding, I'd love to give all of our youth who take the class and successfully participate a small trauma kit, which would include some gloves, some packing gauze, a larger gauze, and some Band-Aids. Why does this matter? Why am I even bothering with this? Again, our studies have shown that when you do the class and then you're provided with an actual trauma first aid kit, you're 25% more confident in your ability to act if somebody is injured. This I know because we've studied it. So I really appreciate your time, and I recognize that this is difficult in the setting of COVID. There are a lot of new obstacles. I also recognize that this is even more relevant when I asked the board to consider it at this time last year after so many children were shot. I'd like to leave you and take any questions you might have, but I'd like to leave you with a T mask. T stands for No More Trauma. Our group is also doing a lot of anti-COVID work, and I'd like to give you all one of these as a sign of our commitment to doing everything that we want to do with the youth this year safely, inside, precautions related to COVID, but still giving them resources so that they can act. We do have a list of the schools that we were hoping to reach, and I think we'd have to work strategically with the schools to find out how we can distribute the packs and also make sure it works within their timeline. But I'm really only asking at this point for 45 virtual minutes, and then we could consider in the future how we could do hands-on training when it's safe to do so. So with that, I really appreciate you giving me the time to share, and I'll take any questions you might have.
First of all, thank you very much for coming on your birthday, more than one, and your commitment and your passion to this work. And so at this point in time, board members, are there any questions?
I'd like to say happy birthday to you, Dr. Punch.
Thank you, good to see you.
We've seen each other 3 times since Friday. And I'd like to commend your efforts in the community. You were at Schnucks giving away masks and books for students. But more importantly, you came to our ward meeting. I'm in the 26th ward, and you trained the community. And so I'm happy to have you on board.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, just kudos. I remember you from the town hall that we had way back when we could have in-person gatherings. And I just appreciate your persistence and also your passion for the work. And I'm glad that we're able to bring this to our district.
Any other questions? Again, Doc, thank you very much for being here tonight. I think the work you do is fantastic, and we're looking forward to partnering to make sure that we could get kids online over the next 3 to 6 months to participate in your program. Again, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here.
Appreciate it. And
Thank you.
I'll leave these masks
Yeah.
over here.
You can give them to the board secretary right there. We'll make sure everybody gets one. Thank you again, and happy birthday again. At this time, we have Mrs. Banks, who will give a financial update for July. The board received an initial presentation that really was much more comprehensive around last year's budget. But the last one you received, which I think was yesterday, and the hard copies in your packet, is the one that we will be presenting, which is a July monthly financial update that's really just focused on the month of July as opposed to last year's budget. Ms. Banks will talk a little bit about that because that's an unaudited budget, and we won't actually have that budget completed until the audit is done, and you'll see that sometimes in December. So all of the information for fiscal year 1920 is a preliminary budget. She's going to go over the July monthly financial update, and you'll be getting one of these every single month. The intent, since this is the first month that we're doing it, if there are questions that you have or things that you want added, please let us know, since we're just starting to do this on a monthly basis, so that we can make adjustments as we move forward. Ms. Banks?
Okay, thank you. Dr. Adams has basically just given my whole presentation. So here's our financial objectives. And of course, these have not changed, but of course, it's going to be extremely important to maintain the alignment to the transformation plan, as everything is going to be much more challenging this year. So the agenda is as followed. I'll give a brief kind of financial update on what's going on with COVID. Our preliminary last year FY 19-20 unaudited results go straight into the July fiscal year 21 and a little bit of what's coming. So I think we all have heard that we already had a state budget cut for the current year to the impact of about $4.1 million estimated. This was a $123 million state budget restriction, which impacts our GOB budget. There was a similar budget cut to last year, fiscal year 20, same amount, 123 million, but our impact then was about $5.5 million. We have already received CARES funds and we're spending those funds. Our allocation was about $10.7 million. And $3.7 million actually is going to our non-public schools, our Catholic and independent schools within the city, and all those funds do flow through the district. We know that there are additional fiscal funds that will be made available, but at this point, we don't know what our allocation will be, so we'll just be keeping an eye out for those additional funding sources. So this is just a high-level overview of last year's activity, current as of early August. As Dr. Adams mentioned, we're not finished with the year yet. So this is just year to date for fiscal year 19-20. We're still receiving some tax revenue and federal reimbursements. We're still paying some invoices that are coming in late and making our year-end adjustments. So a particular note is the almost $20 million in red under federal. You can see looks like a shortfall. That's that is, not unusual. That's primarily federal reimbursements because with federal dollars, we spend the money first and then we request reimbursements from DESE and the feds. So that's primarily early childhood special education and title-based funds. So not unusual, and we do anticipate that we will receive all of those funds. So of course, I didn't mention on the top is all the revenue, and at the bottom are the expenditures, but across the top, we see that we have it broken out into various fund categories: general operating, debt service, food service, federal, and trust. So this is just a graphical view of the information presented on the last slide. The top pie chart shows how we actually spent the funds, and with the largest slices being salaries and benefits, as you would suspect. The next largest slice would be purchase services in gray, which includes our largest contracts, including transportation and food service, and then all of our smaller contracts and other purchase services. The green slice of other is our payment of principal and interest on our outstanding bonds. Supplies and materials in yellow is pretty self-explanatory, but it also includes $8 million of gas and electric utilities. That's considered a supply. The small blue slice of capital outlay includes hardware, software, and equipment valued over $1,000 in other capital project expenditures. Now, the line chart on the bottom shows how we spent the funds throughout the year, July 2019 through June 2020 in red. So you can see it's a pretty even spend of about $30 million a month. Looking at the revenue, how we receive the revenue, The blue line, it's not very even because most of our revenue comes from taxes. The largest amount comes from taxes, and that's received primarily in December and January. So again, just that uneven distribution between revenues and expenditures is a reason why it's good to have a healthy fund balance. Moving on to fiscal year 21, this is just a reminder of the budgets that were approved in June. You can see again that it's by fund across the top. We got revenues on the top half and expenditures on the bottom half. So we have a total revenue budget of $391.5 million and a total expenditure budget of $397.6 million. So moving on to July. July historically is our lowest month for both revenues and expenditures. That's because all the schools are still out, so it's primarily our 12-month staff, which is the central office staff. Principals do come back in July. They're considered the 11.5-month staff, but their first payroll is not until August. And as I mentioned, federal funds are based on you spend the money first, then you get a reimbursement. So again, there's not going to be a lot of activity. In contracted services, there's just not a lot going on in July. We're just getting started for the year. So this is just a preliminary of our July revenues results. And I say preliminary because it typically takes about 30 days for us to close out the month. So we typically don't close out July until about the end of August. So when we come back to report in August, our July will be final and we'll have an August preliminary. So the majority of the revenue is general operating revenue. You can see the $2.7 million of revenue for July on the top half. Now the graph on the bottom, we have the revenues by source, and you can see the budget or the large bars. And next to those large bars are going to be the revenues actually received. You don't see very much now because we don't have much, but there's a little sliver in the local column. So as I come back each month, the bars of received, you'll see those rising over time because it's going to be a year-to-date report. So we have $2.7 million of revenue in July, representing about 0.7% of the overall revenue budget. Here are the July expenditures for all funds. It's the same concept as with the prior slide. Year-to-date expenditures, and these are with the major expenditure categories, salaries, benefits, so on and so forth. You can see at the bottom part on the bar graph, the small orange bars next to the blue bars are the budgets for the object category, but the little yellow bars show the July expenditures. And again, when I come back next month, it'll be both July and August, so those expenditures received, those bars will increase. So we spent roughly $4 million in July, or 1% of the expenditure budget. So looking ahead, we think that we're going to see more proposed legislation coming our way that didn't pass last year, probably more on charter schools and on taxes, both of which would likely be detrimental to us. And there may be some other surprises. You know, we have our tax levy that we still have to set in September. We'll see how taxes do this year with, all the high unemployment and bad news in the economy. So that might obviously impact some of our largest expenditure categories and what might happen in those areas. Like last year, we did not spend as much in transportation as we typically do because obviously children weren't riding the buses after March. Same thing with utilities. There may be savings in utilities, depending on when we're back brick and mortar. And there are other things that may look potentially a lot different than they have in prior years. And of course, we'll be prepared to continue the discussion on how to address our structural and academic inefficiencies. So that really concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions or any suggestions about the format going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Board, are there any questions for Mrs. Banks?
Hi, Ms. Banks. So in the presentation, you said the minimum fund balance was 10%, and I believe we have a district goal or where we want a target of 22%. And I believe in the draft, it said that the year-end projection was 33%. If you go back, I think it's just one slide, maybe it's two slides. Yeah, right there. Well, one, is that accurate? So are we projecting a 33% fund balance by the end of the year?
Yes, I think 33% is about an accurate projection at this point.
Okay, and then, so two-part question, would the unknowns, so the state budget cuts and proposed legislation drop that fund balance? And if so, do you know what the threshold is? So like what would the cut have to be, or what is the impact that we could take to still maintain a 22% fund balance?
That is a very good question. Typically with the state budget cuts, the way that our funding is related to the charter schools, that's some of that charter legislation that I alluded to earlier. So it depends on, it's probably much more dependent on what happens with that legislation more so than a state budget cut simply. But I could probably run some numbers to really figure out what type of an impact we'd have to have from a revenue standpoint to reduce our fund balance.
Okay, and actually, let me ask a better question. So would the 33% projection, that's encompassing the potential for those legislative changes?
It is not.
Okay, that's all. Okay,
Okay.
that's what I need. Because I guess I could just do the math to figure out what the number would be to 22%, because it's just one over the other, right?
It's a little bit more complicated, but it's not hard to do.
Are there any other questions to Ms. Banks? Ms. Banks, I do have one question. If you go back and look at slide 7. It's 2 more slides. It's 2020-21 adopted budget. I think that's it right there. You are indicating a revenue funds coming from the state, at least your projection was $14,794,000. Am I correct?
Yes.
And so already in July, the state has reduced our revenue even before we get to month 2 by about $4 million. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so even your projection for revenue has gone down by $4 million based upon the initial cut in July, not counting what might happen over the next 12 months.
Yes.
So the balanced budget that you are projecting, which is about $100,000 in surplus, if you will, is $100,000 above, it's already impacted by that fact that $4 million is not coming back from the state. So in other words, if we were closed shop right now, we would be $4 million. If everything else holds true, we would have a $4 million deficit based upon this year's funding for the 2021 school year, based on the fact that the $4 million has been cut from the state budget to us.
Correct.
Okay, I just kind of want to call that out because we're just starting in July and we already see some reduction in revenue coming from the state already, not counting what might happen with local revenue as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do have one more question, or I guess a request. I know this is the first one. Would it be possible, I think we asked for this, but would it be possible to get a separate report that just indicates COVID-related expenditures? I know it might be wrapped up in the supplies and services and maybe even salaries and benefits.
Mr. Lang, it was provided electronically yesterday, and it's in your packet right now. You should have a copy in your packet. Dr. Rogers asked for a copy, and she received a copy, and I think we provided one to everyone either today or yesterday.
Okay.
You did not receive it?
In the new board book? I did not. No, I did not get one.
I'll make sure you get it. I have a copy for you right here.
And is that something that also can be part of the presentation for the public to see as well, or is that just for us?
No, we could make it public. It's not complete right now, but this is preliminary. But yes,
I mean, in the future.
We could have it for the next month. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question before you leave. I'd like to just follow up on Dr. Adams' question. So when we go to the revenue category and come down to state on the adopted budget, that new figure is $10,000, 794.
Roughly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Banks. Sorry, at this point in time, we have, the board requested a virtual school update. I've asked the ladies, Dr. Knight, Dr. Moody, and newly appointed Mrs. Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, who will be providing an update. They're going to kind of take their time because I know the board asked for this. And so I'm not going to push them. They have about 30 minutes, and obviously the board can push in any kind of questions they might have, but I'm going to give them some time based upon the board's request. Ladies, whenever you're ready.
Good evening. So tonight we're going to give you updates, give you an overview on the work that the academic office has been working on over the last, quite frankly, since March. What I'd like to do is, as Dr. Adams indicated, we have Dr. Moody, who is our Director of Curriculum and Instruction. She has been working with the curriculum coordinators over this summer, as well as the 30+ teachers who have worked to align and realign the curriculum to be more standards-based across all grade levels, across the content. And then we also have Natasha Mitchell, who is the Interim Director of Virtual Learning, where she's taking all of the curriculum that has been created by the team, and she is pushing it out where we are creating these virtual protocols. What I will say, and I'm really proud of this work, I think you will be really pleased with what you see. There was a lot of lessons learned. I know, Mr. Lane, you asked this question several times over the summer and made note of that. And you will see that in the plan where we have indeed highlighted those lessons learned, because that's the only way that we can really improve this work going into the new year. And I think with what you see, in fact, I know with what you see, you will be pleased with it. We will cover the curriculum, what we call the virtual learning plan 2.0, which is essentially the umbrella of the curriculum. It's housing the assessments. It houses professional development for teachers, professional development for principals, as well as professional development for parents. ABAR, which is the anti-bias, anti-racism curriculum, I know that several of you have raised this question as well around what are we doing in the area of social justice. You will see the curriculum that will be rolled out this year as well. A comprehensive, I might add, a comprehensive curriculum that has been created over the summer. And then the virtual plan. How do we take all this work and we push it out in a virtual perspective where we're talking about what are we expecting of teachers? What are we expecting of the children, depending on their grade level? How much time will they have online? And so you will get all of that tonight. You have a binder that has captured all of these documents. And so while we may not be able to go through each tab, we will highlight these 4 critical areas for you. And if you have additional questions, we are certainly happy to respond to those questions. So I will turn it over to Dr. Moody, who will give you the overview of the ABAR as well as the curriculum, and then Natasha Mitchell, who will give you the overview as it relates to the virtual plan.
Thank you, Dr. Knight, and good evening. Okay, there we go. All right, we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to dive into the academic updates, and we're going to get started with the standards-based curriculum plan. So the curriculum plan has been updated for the 2020-21 school year. We have highlighted primary, secondary, and supporting standards, what students should know and be able to do by the end of the year. We have standards linked with proficiency scales, recommended pacing, essential questions, aligned instructional resources, which I'll review when we look at the virtual learning plan 2.0, and assessments for and of student learning with district options for common formative assessments and district options for common summative assessments as well. We all have separated the documents to be externally facing, and that will be posted on our district website as of this Friday, August 14th by 4 p.m. and an internal facing document. We're calling that our internal facing document plus resources. In our internal facing document, we have everything a teacher really or an instructional leader would need to plan. We have everything in there, including exit slip database, questions, stems, and prompts, hyperdocs, digital text, links, other digital resources, videos, district-wide collaborative spaces for our teachers to share ideas. Really anything an instructional leader would need to plan and prepare for teaching and learning. And then we have our ABAR plan. Okay, we're gonna go to our virtual plan 2.0. So we'll look at our virtual plan 2.0. And again, our virtual plan 2.0 is our umbrella document. And it really covers everything that, I can't really see that if we would go up. Lessons learned. So let's take a look at lessons learned. I know that's a big deal. And really that's been our guiding light in all of this work that we're doing here, our lessons learned. So 6 key lessons have been highlighted in that virtual plan 2.0 document.
I'm sorry, are we following along with you in the binder? Or is that a separate document you're using? Right here.
It's on screen. Mm-hmm. The virtual learning plan 2.0, it's on the screen right now.
Is it in the binder?
It's in the binder as well.
Okay, can you direct me to where it is in the binder?
Okay, it should be a tab labeled virtual learning plan
Okay.
2.0.
Thank you.
Where lessons learned. Yeah.
It is the last tab in blue, the last tab in the book in blue.
Thank you.
So we have 6 primary lessons learned. Starting with our instructional model, we learned in March that our instructional model really we weren't really prepared for virtual learning, but we were thrust into it. And so now we've adopted a blended instructional model.
for teaching and learning. We've had some equity concerns because we had a number of stakeholders, parents, children who didn't have technology, and we struggled to deliver technology to our parents and families, along with some other equity issues. We were not prepared for how the pandemic would disproportionately impact our stakeholders, particularly Black and Brown children and their families. And we want to be sure that as we go into this new school year, that we do not re-traumatize them with experiences of racism and bias. Communication, two-way communication, super important. We are working very hard to be sure that we establish open two-way communication between the district and our stakeholders. Instructional practices, again, leaning into a blended model for teaching and learning. Technology and infrastructure, and you'll see how detailed we are getting with providing a detailed framework for the delivery of virtual teaching and learning, and staff support. Our staff, they are the backbone of all of this work, and we really are working hard this year, moving into the new school year, to support our staff and helping them to feel valued and supported through all of this process. The virtual learning plan is divided into 3 sections, 3 key sections: supporting continuous instruction, providing access for all students, and maintaining the connectedness with our community. We can go down to the checklist. We have in our virtual plan 2.0 a checklist for parents and families. We realize, I don't know if you all have children in your family, but I have a child at home who was thrust into this process with me of virtual learning. We were not prepared. And even though I'm an educator, I simply was not ready for all the things that I would have to prepare for at home to be a working mom and a homeschooler at the same time. So we provided a general checklist with links for our families to use as they prepare for virtual instruction and beyond. We've also included in this plan blended learning resources for core subjects. So we have 3 pages, and they list and they are hyperlinked, all hyperlinked, our blended learning instructional resources. This document will be available online for our stakeholders to view. It's separated by content area and grade level. There are also indicators to help our stakeholders determine whether it requires a username and password, or if it must be downloaded before use, and if it is school specific. So again, there are 3 pages of instructional resources available. We also have roles for supporting virtual learning. Again, I myself found myself and a quandary when it came to what is my role in virtual education as a parent. And so here we are, we have provided for our families, our stakeholders, our student roles, our teachers' roles, and the roles for families. When there's learning that takes place at home, we understand that the role for families gets a little bigger. And so we've listed those key elements here in hopes that we can support our stakeholders, our families, in supporting us in our efforts to educate our children. We have some details about technology, providing access for all students. And again, a link to some resources here. We want to stay connected to our community, as well as provide resources that are necessary for continued sustainability. And we have a link here, and our stakeholders will be able to find links for information from everything from food, support for utilities, and healthcare as well. We also have included an appendix. This appendix includes a link to our ABAR plan, which we'll review shortly right after this. Also links to our professional development plan for the new school year, including in parent engagement sessions. Those sessions begin on September 17th, with the first session being becoming a virtual parent. This includes a parent panel. Again, we're referencing back to lessons learned. And so we'll hoping to see parents engage with us from September 17th through May 13th. We have access, again, in our appendix to a Microsoft Teams playlist to assist our stakeholders with using our technology tools. We have included in Appendix D, DESE recommended daily instructional minutes. This equals to, no matter the school, no matter the circumstances, about a 50-50 breakdown to our kids, to helping our stakeholders understand that our students will be online approximately 3 hours a day, engaged in real time instruction with teachers, and 3 hours a day doing independent work. And finally, FAQ section, which includes links to ELL support and special education support. We also have our ABAR plan. This again leans into our lessons learned. Again, we were not prepared for how the pandemic would disproportionately impact our students, particularly our Black and Brown students. Yes.
Just want to make sure the board is, that's behind the yellow tab right before the presentation that was just made. So it's behind the same tab as that, it begins that tab. So the board is trying to keep up with you. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we want to be careful not to re-traumatize our students with inequities and implicit bias as we enter into this new school year. So we've developed this ABAR plan to roll out to all of our stakeholders. Again, this will be posted online as well. It's inclusive of an introduction that includes our commitment to ABAR, the district's commitment to ABAR, and how we're going to roll that out. It also includes a background of bias and racism in our community and how it's impacted education. It includes instructional resources. So ABAR instructional resources. We don't want there to be an excuse for our instructional leadership and our teachers to say, well, we don't have resources to support ABAR instruction and social justice instruction. So we've listed some really prominent resources here in this curated list. Also, for in curriculum, we have a really, we adopted last year, but we are highlighting this year our cultural context differentiation. Cultural context differentiation is lesson differentiation based on student individual needs and learning styles. It challenges the teacher to consider and honor the unique cultural differences of every student when selecting content, process, products, the learning environment, the use of ongoing assessment and flexible grouping in an effort to establish a safe and supportive learning environment for all students. We've identified 4 key elements of cultural context differentiation, including activating student prior knowledge, making learning contextual, considering classroom setup and groupings, and building relationships. We've also included an African American Studies update. Seniors in St. Louis Public Schools have the option of taking African American Studies in lieu of British literature their senior year. That curriculum has been updated, and the revision is inclusive of literature and informational texts across all timelines of African American history and the diaspora. There's a link to the African American Studies scope and sequence in this document. There are also social studies updates, as well as information regarding professional development. Again, we don't want there to be an excuse or pushback about why someone cannot participate in ABAR professional development. And so we have done the research and have linked ABAR professional development key frameworks to our PBTE, and that's our performance-based teacher evaluation tool. We've highlighted 2 key areas, that is responsive teaching strategies and teacher-student relationships and responsive behavior management. In September of 2020, the academic office will begin hosting book studies for our teachers. In this document, you will find a link to our ABAR book study survey, where we are surveying teachers and stakeholders. Anybody's welcome to participate to determine which book we're going to start with and make any additional recommendations. There's already quite an extensive list there already. We have our summer reading list, which is also was also curated with an ABAR lens, and next steps. Dr. Casey Seal Shahid, principal at Central Visual and Performing Arts High School and newly appointed SLPS Equity Ambassador, is committed to carrying out the following next steps using an action research model to identify best practices as we move forward in our ABAR efforts. This includes equity teams, the identification of key equity indicators, professional development, equity instructional learning walks, review of best practices around anti-bias, anti-racism, and a collaborative and purposeful effort to promote the SLPS equity policy. We can go back to the PowerPoint. To wrap up, academic office updates for curriculum. Where are we? Okay, we can, there we go. Okay, again, we have proficiency scales to support the conversation around feedback, to change the conversation from what do I need to do to get an A? Oh, you need 4 points, to a real solid conversation about what students need to know and be able to do better in a class. Academic book sharing. All text should be made available digitally to students for use with one-to-one devices to eliminate the need to share copies of books or papers. Academic updates include school supply kits. So banker boxes have been ordered and they've already been delivered to schools. And the supply list is inclusive of a number of things. We are facing some delays with the delivery of supply due to no fault of our own. Some large companies like Crayola shut down. But we do have some stakeholders to the rescue who are providing some supplies so that we can get them to students who need it the most. That is it for our academic updates. Oh no, we just have one more thing. Academic updates also include visual and performing arts instructional expectations. So as you all know, the instructional expectations for visual and performing arts have been greatly impacted by the pandemic. No longer will there be a need to actually perform, particularly now that we are virtual. So our curriculum arts specialists for visual and performing arts have provided guidance for push in, pull out virtually, and whole class virtual instruction. And that is also included in your binder as well. Now, that is it for me for the academic updates, and we can move on to how we're going to roll all this out virtually. And so I'll introduce Natasha Mitchell, Interim Director of Virtual
Wait,
Instruction.
hold on 1 second.
Sure.
You want to do questions
Yeah,
now?
would it be okay if we did some questions now based on the curricular piece, just so we're
Sure.
not doing 10,000 questions all at the end?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
So
are
at
there
this point in
just a-
time, are there any questions for Dr. Moody?
Go ahead.
Good evening, and thank you for your presentation. As it relates to our standards-based plan and grading guidance, how do we know that this is going to be the best practice to use? So like, what have we looked at to know that this is going to be the best way to move forward for our students?
So the research shows that in a virtual environment and blended instructional environment, standards-based instruction is key to student success. Students are more successful when they are challenged with hitting key targets. And what a standards-based curriculum plan does is identify those key targets using curriculum scales. So no longer, again, is the conversation around what do I need to do to get an A in this class? It becomes, what do I need to do, to do well in this class? And instead of telling the student, you need 40 more points, the teacher can be really specific and say, you need to show me that you can make a claim and support it with textual evidence. And so that is what our effort in the standards-based instructional plan is, to support that teacher-student feedback and identify key learning targets to help students be more successful.
Thank you for that. And I just have one more question, and then I'll allow somebody else. Is that okay? To ask a
Yes.
question.
I want to note, though, before you move forward, that we are only doing standard-based grading right now around K1 and 2. And we're
Yes.
adding grade 3. This is the 3rd year of doing so.
Yes,
And
sir.
so we're adding a grade. So it's not K-12, it's only the earlier grades that we're looking at.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dr. Adams. And so I'm grateful to see the day in the, in life of a teacher and principal, and the fact that we're going to do some type of training for the parents. However, I want to see or hear more about what we're going to do as it relates to a district production of standards of how, so I know that schools have their own autonomy as it relates to, educating maybe their staff or perhaps maybe even the parents about how to do something, but I want to see our district produce a technology-based video on how to use Microsoft Teams or how to use different programs that we're going to be using across the board, so that if a parent has a student at Soldian, or if a parent has a student at Dewey, they are getting different information from two different district representatives.
You are right, with us, with our lessons learned, and Natasha Mitchell will speak to that. So we have an answer to your question.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I have a question. I think this binder speaks to a lot of questions that I've been asked by the community at large. And so I want to thank you for putting this kind of document together. And if I'm hearing correctly, this will appear online
Yes, ma'am.
and the community will have access to it?
Yes.
Okay, my question then lends itself to you. What will be the evidence or timeline where we will know what student progress looks like?
Well,
We're going virtual, and for some families, they're choosing the building. So I'd like to see some more emphasis put on what student progress looks like. How will we measure that?
understood. Well, Natasha Mitchell can speak more directly, but we will be recording all grades now that we're virtual in our students' SIS system. And we will be training all teachers, and that will also be training families and stakeholders about how to use that SIS system. So it's an online system where they'll be able to keep up with student grading and expectations.
I don't know that that actually spoke to her question. I think her question is really a question around how we're judging where students started and where they end in terms of the progress. And I think you have formative assessments that
Yes.
really do that. So I think it's
Yes,
really
sir.
about the formative assessments. I think
Yes.
that's where Dr. Roberts was
Understood.
more going, and not necessarily the grading, but
Grading.
to know how the progress is taking place.
Understood. Yes, we do have district-wide common formative assessments to assess students where they are when they begin instruction, and district common summative assessments to assess where they are after instruction has occurred. It's all standards-based and aligned to the Missouri Learning Standards.
And so our students will be tested virtually, that data will be collected, and then it will be recorded.
Yes.
So that we can determine, are students learning?
Yes.
Or is mastery taking place?
Exactly.
So my question is similar along the same lines as Dr. Roberts. So I'm thinking back to our July meeting. Dr. Adams shared some research around learning loss and some other really striking data on what we might expect to take place. So how, at the beginning of the school year, how are we going to assess that learning loss? And then how are we supporting teachers into modifying the scope and sequence and the curriculum to meet that, kind of to fill that gap, but then also work towards the standards for the current grade level?
So the scope and sequence is not modified per se, but we have allowed in our instructional tools some autonomy for teachers to some wiggle room, if you will, for instructional pacing. Additionally, with the standards-based plan, we have included proficiency scales. Those include learning targets. And so it assists teachers along with our weekly planner in developing real tangible learning targets for students. And so no longer, they can meet students where they are instead of teaching broadly to the standard. And we are anticipating, with support from our curriculum specialists, that teachers will begin to adopt that in their differentiation practices to meet students' needs.
So that sounded specific to the standards base. So if that's at the lower grades, what type of adjustments are being made at the higher grades to accommodate for that same? And then are we doing assessments at the beginning of the year, like right away?
These are available in grades K through 12. They are only implementing standards-based grading in grades K through 3. but all of the resources, the instructional support, the instructional framework, the proficiency scales, the planning tool, those are available to every grade level. Yes.
My question is in regards to tools, learning tools. A grandparent like myself or other family members have expressed an interest as the school year goes along that they might want to buy extra games or things that will help their young people stay interested. I know they're going to have their iPads or laptops or what have you. Well, I mean, that's a great medium, but some of us might want to buy something extra. If you have recommendations from teachers that would help, keep learning interesting online, that would be really, really helpful, because we got Christmas coming up and what have you. Instead of people investing money in other things, we might want to start investing in our children's education. But we have suggestions from educators like yourself on great games or whatever they can do to help. That would be really great.
So you'll find those 3 pages in the virtual learning plan 2.0. There are 3 pages of blended instructional support materials. Those are all online digital resources that are available to our students. And they have been identified and they are available and listed and hyperlinked in the virtual learning plan 2.0. And they are listed by content area and grade level. So if a stakeholder is interested in trying to find out how they can support their child digitally, they can simply reference that document, click on one of those items, and some of them schools have already purchased those services. Previously, this was kind of a secret. Our stakeholders didn't know all of our digital resources, but we have 3 full pages of digital resources from grades pre-K through 12, and they are all listed and linked in the virtual learning plan 2.0.
Okay, thank you.
Pages 7, 8, and 9 are the pages you're referencing, am I correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Hi,
Ms.
Dr.
Jones?
Moody. I have 2 questions. First one has a couple of parts. I just wanted to make sure that I'm clear and the board's clear on our definition of one-to-one. I know we've talked about it for a while, but in the summer, if there were like 3, and I might be getting my numbers wrong, but if there were 3 students in the household, we didn't send home 3 iPads, it would be 2, but we are one-to-one. So if there are 5 students in the household, that's 5 people.
We are
Yes, sir.
one-to-one.
Okay.
Yes, sir, that is correct this year. That is correct.
So then the question stemming from that is, have we considered with, again, let's say potentially there are 5 students in a household and 5 different iPads, and they're all doing this, virtual, they're all on virtual learning platforms. Have we considered multiple hotspots per household based on the numbers of students that might be in a house?
I think Mrs. Van Oy is indicating 5. No, I'm sorry. She can clap. Just this.
Our current hotspots support 10 devices simultaneously.
10
So if-
devices.
correct.
So 10 devices streaming simultaneously?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. The second question is around ABAR. So I'm glad that, and I did read through the curriculum, and I'm glad that we are instituting that. One thing that I didn't see in the plan that I know is very critical to a comprehensive ABAR program is the ability to report incidences of bias because, people, 1, either don't know they're biased, or 2, don't care. So do we have a system for either students or families or even other teachers to be able to report confidentially incidences of bias that will be reviewed by someone who's trained in reviewing that?
Yes, so there are details in the next steps. So here on our last page of the ABAR plan, there are next steps. And in fact, it's number 1 listed. Dr. Casey Steele-Shahid is our ABAR liaison, and she is establishing equity teams. And this will be the liaison at the school level to the district office, and they will be the person at the school level to whom all incidents should be reported.
So those incidents will be reported, by phone call, face-to-face?
Well, those are our next steps, and they're
Okay.
being developed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I would, I'm not an expert. My recommendation would be that there is some sort of platform, some digital platform that people can submit these responses, because I've seen it go haywire when it's call this number, call this person. Because again, there's also bias in, people when it comes to reporting, and I've just seen incidences where there's a lack of response because of certain relationships that people might have. So I would push for a system that is electronic, that they can get the initial report, and maybe the follow-up or investigation is done by people. That would just be my suggestion.
Thank you.
So this is more of a comment than anything, but I am really very happy to see the banker box idea delivering the actual tangible school supplies. So we know people learn by touching and doing and interacting with materials, and particularly younger children. And so I think this is a really important supplement to the virtual learning piece, not only having it as part of the curriculum, but making sure that we meet that need of families to have those supplies at home and ready and able to carry out those types of assignments that kids can touch.
Thank you.
Yeah, the intent right now is that they get 9 weeks of material that will take them all the way through October the 16th. Obviously, if something changes after that, we'll have to make an adjustment, but we're looking to give kids all of the materials they need for the first 8 or 9 weeks of school.
Okay, I have two more questions actually. So as it relates to, having the parent instructional day or time, how will we market that to ensure that our parents know that this is happening outside of the website? What new ideas will we be implementing to get that information out to the public?
Yes,
And then
Natasha Mitchell will address that in her presentation, yes.
no problem. And then my second question is, I think it's great that we will have some, extra resources for our students to refer to for class this year. Some of them are free, as you said, purchased by the district. But I know that a lot of our students, so we'll have, this grading guidance and these standards coming in. But I would like to know, what are we going to do for the kids that will walk in extremely deficient? You have kids that are coming straight from kindergarten into first grade, and they got only half of kindergarten. And so how are we prepared to take that on? Will there be a second instructional person that's going to be on that call with the teacher to assess those students or to help them with reading so that they can, get on target with the rest of the classroom?
Yes, we have adopted guided reading as our primary support for reading instruction. We have also included extended minutes for reading instruction as well. And again, there's a 50-50 learning day of 3 hours online, 3 hours offline. But for those 3 hours of offline, we have recommended and highly suggested, and some schools are requiring that those hours be dedicated to support services as well.
So right now, Mrs. Jones, I am meeting with the local union 420 to talk about what the role of the support staff will be. I met with Mr. Cummings yesterday for an hour. We also met earlier that day as well. And my intent is to come back on the 25th with some agreement as it relates to how we utilize support staff, such that they are that second person on the call, or they also are having breakout rooms where those support persons, ICAs, TAs, in-school suspension monitors, and others might be utilized. There are some 869 people in that category that likely will not be utilized in a traditional sense. And so we're working on revising some job descriptions and working with Local 420 to try to utilize every personnel such that they are that second or third person on the phone, or at least not on the phone, on the Zoom or Microsoft Teams, assisting in some way, shape, or form. So that is still in the works at this point in time. And I will be providing some feedback to the board on the 25th.
I think that is tremendous, Dr. Adams. And so I look forward to that on that day. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dr. Mitchell. And this is really about the virtual environment and what happens virtually.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. So Dr. Moody really prefaced the curriculum and academic backbone of what's going into virtual learning. So just a couple of things around what to expect for the 2020-2021 school year. We are implementing a blended learning instructional framework as our core virtual learning delivery method. This is a really sustainable method. We are using it as a reactive framework because of the pandemic and because of school closures. However, it is a sustainable model that we will continue after this school year. It's essentially a method of instruction that integrates technology and digital media with our traditional instructor-led classroom activities that we are used to seeing in previous times. How the day is going to look is students will engage in pre-scheduled synchronous instruction for every subject area. This is going to happen either daily or on a block schedule, depending on the specific school schedule. Synchronous instruction includes face-to-face class meetings, direct instruction, collaboration, discussion, and intervention. Synchronous live instruction, so that's when we're expecting students to be on a Zoom, on a team, a video conference platform, is going to be balanced with an asynchronous weekly playlist that's directly aligned to the lesson objectives and designed for students to work through independently. So when Dr. Moody was speaking to the 50-50 split, this is what we mean. It's 50% of this synchronous instruction, 50% of asynchronous instruction. And that is actually for every single grade level. So the question is what to expect in the virtual instructional day. I think we've yielded more questions about this than probably anything else. So what we have configured here and has been shared with leadership is some sample schedules. We want to note that in this environment, we are no longer utilizing a hold harmless framework, so we are using grading. And so what that means is we cannot lower our expectations. Many of you spoke to unfinished learning that has happened, so therefore we must adhere to a minimum of the DESE required minutes. And so you'll see that reflected in the sample schedules. This elementary sample schedule breaks down a side-by-side view of what a virtual teacher's day might look like and what a virtual student's day might look like. So beginning at 8 a.m., the teacher is clocking in, they're getting their lessons launched. A student is getting ready for learning for that day. At 8:30, my first virtual instructional block begins. For this sample schedule, you will see a 90-minute virtual block. The 90-minute block is broken up 50-50, 45 minutes of live synchronous instruction, 45 minutes of asynchronous instruction. And you'll see that repeated in the other instructional blocks. So how this actually looks is 45 minutes of my live lesson. Also, as a student, I may have some time for intervention after that. And then I have some time to work independently. This is the window in which we provide that flexibility that families may need. While we are really encouraging families to get onto these live lessons, we understand the need for flexibility, and that asynchronous playlist, why we keep saying it's a weekly playlist, is because I'm looking at the learning objectives for the week, and I can plan as a family the best time for my student to complete that work. There are lunch breaks and technology breaks built into the schedule, as well as teacher plan time. So we are honoring the union mandated schedules. Teachers get a plan time, and then students get related arts and things like that. Additionally, there is time built into the day for teachers to support families with wellness checks and one-to-one touch. If you look at this color-coded schedule, it breaks down basically the synchronous, intervention, and asynchronous components of a schedule. So what we're looking at is approximately 120 to 150 minutes a day of that synchronous live lesson. So if you look at that ELA virtual block with this sample schedule, you see my live lesson is happening. Then I might have a guided reading or an intervention lesson. And then I have that independent work time. So for a student, for a learner, for a family at home, that begins to allow you to schedule out your instructional day. If you go through the schedule, you'll see that repeated throughout the day. So when Dr. Moody was speaking to the 3 hours on, 3 hours off, this is what we mean. With these schedules, the question is, as a leader, as a school leader, how do we begin to ensure that great instruction is happening, and how can leaders model their schedule to become an instructional leader in the virtual world and hold teachers accountable, students accountable for the learning that should take place. So leaders were provided with this sample schedule. I won't spend a lot of time here, but what the schedule really does is show an emphasis on providing teachers with great support. So I want to emphasize this word support in their virtual teaching, as well as you'll see observation schedules with those feedback loops closed. Additionally, because we realize the importance of planning in this virtual space, the leader, so the principal, AIC, we have a really robust focus on lesson planning, ensuring that lesson plans are turned in, ensuring that the AIC and principal are giving feedback on lesson plans, working with teachers side by side to ensure that they are able to make any revisions needed before the expectation of content being posted on Monday morning by 8 a.m. Skipping ahead, we realized with this new model of lesson delivery, we really needed a planning tool that supported these expectations. And so this is an example of a planning tool. It is still being developed. And so what you'll see is a planning tool that lends itself to a blended learning instructional framework and allows a teacher to begin to think about their instructional week, how the whole entire week looks, what are the standards that are supposed to be covered, how can I unpack that standard to ensure that students are able to be proficient and access grade level resources? So this particular planning tool is directly aligned to our curriculum tool. We worked diligently as an office to create this seamless transition and connectivity between tools. And so a teacher, when they're planning, can go to the curriculum resources, lift that information directly from there into their virtual learning planning. Where this creativity comes into the planning is in the actual delivery. Once they unpack the standard, that's when that unfinished learning that we continue to talk about can begin to be revealed. So if I see there is a particular standard that or objective with that standard that needs to be covered for a student to access that grade level resource that perhaps was supposed to be covered in fourth quarter last year, that's the time when, as a teacher, I say, let me restructure some of my planning to make sure that we hit that particular objective. The intention of this is to make sure that we are exposing students to grade level resources, which we know is an anchor in equitable instruction, but supporting them in the way that they need to be supported. What you'll notice on this plan is very intentional scaffolding. The scaffolding is designed to support learners in that asynchronous playlist to access these grade level standards and objectives. So the big question is, of course, right, how are we going to pull this off? How will we train staff to make sure that this happens? So Ms. Van Noy, if you'll go to the professional development plan. And then I believe in your guys' binders, that's a different tab.
Ms. Jones has a question at this time. Ms. Jones?
Sure. Yes, thank you for your presentation. I'd like to know if you could speak to, so I think that this is good. However, if a teacher happens to be out, is there a way for our teachers to have some stocked already recorded videos for their specific classroom? And then with that in place, is there a way for us to know if the child or a student actually watched that video? So for instance, it will let us know where they stopped in the video, or where they start, where they stopped in the video. And then if there's some questions after that to ensure that they actually got the information. Do we have some type of technology in place right now for that to happen?
Yes, I don't know specifically if we can monitor every single video if a student watched it, but what we do have built into Microsoft Teams is an app called Insights. So when teachers create their assignments, Insights essentially monitors to the degree of we can see when a student logged in, what was their completion rate. Teachers can go in and give real-time feedback to students on those specific assignments. About your question with the subs, the asynchronous synchronous balance really lends itself to that because the expectation is that teachers have all of the content posted at the beginning of the week. All of these things have been vetted and feedback has been given the week prior. So what that means is in the event a teacher is out, I keep saying that this plan is great, right? No more sub-plans because all of the content is there. So if a teacher's not there for some odd reason, I still have my asynchronous playlist to work through, and I still have that really structured schedule to go from.
How does it speak to the live portions that the teacher has to do?
Yes, so in the same exact way that we would sub if a sub needed to come into a teacher's regular live classroom, any sub, so any support staff that's on the staff, AICs, anybody that's stepping in to do that live instruction has access to those resources. So I was a principal before, so exactly what you're saying happens, right? You're scrambling for things for the kids to do. This will lend itself to saying, okay, I can see all of the assignments that were given for the entire week. What is the expectation for this week? So it's not a guessing game at the beginning of the instructional day, and we're not losing time over staff absences.
And that's the notion of having two adults supporting the classroom. That's why we're looking to try to make sure that that happens, maybe not in every single school, but most schools.
Absolutely. And that's why we have that major emphasis on planning ahead of time and then posting that content so that everybody's fully aware of what the students should be learning.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Yes, so we will go quickly through the professional development plan. The intention really was to make sure teachers feel fully supported and prepared to launch this. We know it's a big ask, but again, back to this idea of really keeping those expectations high for learners, we want to support teachers to launch virtual learning successfully. So we'll go through from the academic office perspective, 5 days of training in order for teachers to become micro-credentialed as a St. Louis Public School virtual teacher. So day one is Microsoft Teams. Because this is our core learning platform, this is the day one, lesson one content, because all teachers will be expected to have all of their assignments, grades, things like that posted in Teams. So that's why we're beginning with that. That will be led by Microsoft experts. In the afternoon of the first day, teachers will be trained on Tyler 360 SIS. We know that the parent portal is a fantastic resource to keep our family connected. Additionally, they'll need to be trained on virtual in-person attendance and creating standards-based assignments in SIS. The second day is the virtual learning playbook for teachers. This is where all of those best practices that we continue to talk about will live. We will view in just a few moments a virtual learning playbook for leaders. So the virtual learning playbook for teachers is essentially a curated toolkit in order for them to start the year successfully, have everything that they need at their resources. And so we took the lift off them to have to surf the internet for what to do and created all of these toolkits for them to utilize. The afternoon of the second day, we're going into Web Design 101. The reason for this is we know some lessons learned from the spring was that we need our public face in the online world, which is the school website, to be better. And so with this, we want to give teachers time to work through this. If we're expecting teachers to design their website, we're expecting teachers to post things on Teams, we're expecting teachers to be very, very up to date in Tyler 360, we realize the need to provide the training on all of these platforms. With the web design professional development, the intention is that the teacher is able to have the time, the training, and the space to create their teacher webpage in a really robust and meaningful way. So every single parent should be able to go to their student's webpage and really essentially meet the teacher. They can go to the About the Teacher section, they can see a welcome video, they can view assignments and things like that directly from the website. The third day is going to get us into blended learning. So that's the instructional framework. So the how of how we're actually going to do this. Because we are asking teachers to do blended learning, we realize the importance of modeling a blended learning lesson. So that's what we'll be doing that afternoon. Finally, on day 4, now that we've had all of these core instructional tools, delivery tools, we get into the curriculum work. So how do I bring the curriculum and the standards into my planning to create great learning experiences for students? That's where teachers will be introduced to the new lesson design tool. They'll understand how to look at the standard, how to look at those proficiency scales, and begin to identify objectives for the learning in addition to unfinished learning. And then finally, on the last day, it is an academic office day, but the reality is it is a blended learning lesson planning day and a day for teachers to launch their virtual learning online. If you guys notice on the right-hand column, there are several action items that teachers are expected to have completed inside of this professional development. With that being said, we want to give teachers plenty of time, plenty of resources to really do this well. So all of the days that they have lesson planning time, the curriculum office and other academic office team members will hold open office. So although I'm at my school, I'm actually planning, I have some guided planning time, I can access all of the academic office members for open office questions and things like that. What you see here, are there any questions about that PD schedule before we go to the calendar? Okay. So what you see here is a proposed schedule. It begins Monday, August 17th. The teachers come back to a classroom prep day. Then we have our 5 days of the academic office professional development. After that, we have network and site-based days. Running simultaneously with this teacher professional development is that technology training. So on August 18th and August 19th, technology instruction coordinators at each school level will be trained on distribution and family technology training. The following week, on Tuesday, August 25th, begins the actual technology and curriculum resource distribution at the school level. This distribution is where parents will be able to access on-the-spot training, resources, and being connected to online resources for learning. We realize an urgent need in the community. Parents need to understand how to use this device. They need to understand how to use their hotspot. They need to have someone there to answer their questions. And so that is the intent of that technology distribution schedule. And Ms. Van Noy, we'll go to the playbook, please. So that is the professional development plan. We are going to go to another tab. It is the virtual learning playbook.
Just a quick question before you move on.
Yes.
You indicated that technology professional development would be available to parents. Two-parter. Is there a call line, a call number for assistance?
Yes, there will be a technology call number for assistance as well. I indicated earlier in my comments about the hotline that's open. It's open now, as a matter of fact. But yes, there will be a call number, technology number for them to call. And there will be 2 technology sites. We haven't named them yet, where parents can go if something breaks, and even hopefully get some deliveries dropped off if there's some issue. But I met with all principals today at the elementary level, and all principals are developing also a technology professional development as parents are picking up the technology based upon the skill set of the parents using it.
And the second part to that, is there a way that a text or something goes out to remind parents where to locate these resources?
I am not sure.
We automatically think and tell them to go to the website, and you can go to the website and look for days and not find out exactly what you're looking for. So is there some way to remind them that the information and help that they need is available on the website under this tab?
So what we're going to do, because I met with principals today, and I'm glad I did because I got some really good information from them. Every school on their school website will have where to go to get all the answers they need as soon as you click to the website. So they can go to the district website if they want to. To your point, that's harder to find information, but all schools are going to be required to have something on the face of their website that addresses the technology, addresses the meetings and all of that place. So there'll be one-stop place to go. At the meeting with the president, she emphasized to me how important that was. And so we're going to make sure that's on every single school's website. Fashawn will have it on their front of their website. So then every single school will have that on their website.
Thank you. So what you guys are looking at now is the virtual learning playbook for school leaders. We understand that really the face of this to be successful is going to be at the school level and ensuring that our school leaders are properly trained to pull this off. So we'll just scroll through. I know it's a pain to scroll with the presentation, but just to give you an overview of what's in the playbook and what principals will have access to. Teachers will have a very similar playbook at their fingertips as well.
So to be clear, that's the last tab in the book for the board members. That's the last tab.
Last tab, yes.
I'm sorry, I'm going to go back for a second. I see we're moving on to school leaders. With the teachers, could you just give me some insight into what's been talked about for, I understand there's one like set of benchmarks and a timeline for all teachers, but knowing that we probably have teachers that have taught for 25 years and teachers that haven't taught a day in the classroom yet, and their preparation is, even though we're setting the time guidelines, as a first-year teacher, just speaking from my experience, it took me a long time to get anything done when it came to planning, just because of the newness of it. So could you just give me some insight into what supports there are for just, our new teachers, teachers who are going to be new to this platform, but what additional supports or grace they're going to be given?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So actually in this, linked in this particular document is, actually, Ms. Van Noy, if you want to scroll down to the section that says effective virtual learning. Right there. Perfect. So what we've identified is 3 key levers for teachers to be successful. Attached to this effective virtual learning is actually a proficiency scale, but not in a proficiency observation type of way. It's really a way to have a touch point for coaching teachers. We realize really the best bang for our buck to get this off in a really meaningful way is to ensure that coaches are ready to support teachers where they are. So what the rubric really does is say, if a teacher is here, if you are at level 1, you are at this level of technology integration, that's okay. We're going to start there and we will continue to coach up. So what we're doing with the coaches, and I've worked with Dr. Sarah Martins on this, is to identify access points in the planning and in the instructional delivery to really, really support teachers with this. We fully understand the level of grace that will be required. And as school leaders, and that's why we kind of shifted to school leaders to say, we're going to need to support teachers, period. And how can that support look? And how can we really create an instructional schedule that emphasizes those coaching and feedback loops that we talked about, looking at the lesson plans in advance, because if we're looking at lesson plans in advance, we can support teachers with getting those lesson plans online. And maybe they have content knowledge, to your point about teachers that have been teaching 25 years, but they're not really sure how to get that great lesson in an interactive virtual platform. And so the coaching is being tailored to reach teachers at that point. And so it is a work in progress. We're all learning in this space, but it is definitely on our mind. And I cannot emphasize enough, if we want our students to be successful, we have to support our teachers and make sure they're successful as well. And that is the intention with providing those sample AIC schedules that have that emphasis on coaching and feedback, and those sample leader schedules that have an emphasis on coaching and feedback. So Ms. Van Noy, if you want to scroll through to the end to the toolkits.
Sorry, I had a follow-up. But with that, and thank you for that answer. Additionally, since we're still on the same topic before we move on, Dr. Adams, you did talk about repurposing staff. So since it's been brought up, has there been thought to, I know you said there should be multiple people or teachers on the live sessions. One thing that I think would be beneficial is, as a teacher, if I can worry solely on the instruction and not about whether video is on and all that tech stuff is messing up. I think that would be an opportunity to repurpose staff in that way.
So as a result of using CARES dollars, Mr. Lang, we have identified we call it a TIC, technology. Say it again. A technology inventory coordinator every single school this year, and that person is responsible for the technology at the school. They're going to get paid a stipend to do this using CARES dollars, because we realize this is a heavy lift to be giving out technology, also following up on technology. So every single school, based on their population, gets to identify somebody, and we pay them to do exactly that. Some of them are ICAs, some of our counselors, but they don't have classes right now. So they'll be supporting teachers in this technology world and also supporting parents to get the technology to them if it breaks. So every single school has identified somebody. They're being trained on the 18th and the 19th to do that particular role, and also to troubleshoot any kind of technology issues that make it easier for teachers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, and this is my last question on this piece. I think it would have been great to get teacher feedback on this to see what they believe would be beneficial, what would be helpful, and what is left out. But as it looks like PD starting on the 18th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So on throughout this, just looking at the schedule, is there going to be an opportunity, and I know we want to try to make it as uniform as possible, but is there an opportunity for teachers to be able to provide real-time feedback on this, have that addressed over the 2-week training period, to make sure that it is not just something that looks good on paper, but is actually effective and useful in practice to teachers?
Absolutely, because with the professional development delivery model, we have to get creative, right, with the social distancing protocols. So every single session, because we're doing the micro credentialing and the micro badges, we'll have an interactive lesson plan tool that goes along with it. So that's how we can assess learning and understanding in real time. Additionally, there will be feedback opportunities on that tool that we can review. You can just go to the very bottom. So what's in the last thing in the toolkit or in the virtual playbook is essentially a curation of toolkits that leaders will have at their fingertips, as well as teachers in the teacher playbook. The question becomes, how do we really ensure that we have the right training, the right support to do this well? We keep scrolling. It's at the very, very bottom. And so one of the most developed toolkits, to your point, is the coaching toolkit that has been developed collaboratively with Dr. Sarah Martins. So this is the toolkits. And so the leaders have this playbook, and they can click directly into the toolkit and access several resources. So if you want to click into the virtual coaching toolkit, it's going to load up in a second, but what you will see in the toolkit is essentially several resources specifically for that toolkit, and this one is around virtual coaching. So touch points for looking at a team's website, looking at lesson design, I'll just speak to it. So a major emphasis on the virtual coaching tools is engagement and feedback, because we realized that was a gap that happened in spring, right? We tried to get kids online. They were doing some learning, but how can we ensure they're engaged in the learning, and how can we ensure that we're giving feedback to students to continue to support their learning in the process? And so that's what those coaching tools will do, in addition to all kinds of other toolkits on the things that we're expecting principals to do, academic coaches to do, and teachers to do.
Are there any other questions for the team, Mitchell, Knight, and Moody? I know a lot of information. The board wanted to deep dive into this. Hopefully that provided some. This is normally a full day presentation, and that they've kind of abbreviated to try to give you some high levels. To your point, Mr. Lang, I think that's an excellent point in terms of feedback. While 30 teachers were involved in writing it, getting daily feedback would be important, and so we'll look to incorporate that into the feedback as it relates to the PD calendar as well. I did meet with principals today, and I think there's some changes we'll likely make to the PD calendar, because principals need one full day for teachers to be in the room by themselves per the contract, so we have to honor that. And lastly, one thing I observed, that the school day really is 8:15 to 3:12. And so I think we have some glitches in what we're communicating regarding that. So the day for everybody is 8:15 to 3:12, not 8 to 8:30. So we'll correct some of the things that I saw in the presentation. But thank you very much, ladies. If the board doesn't have any more questions.
have
Thank
questions.
you.
No, I think there are some more questions.
More questions?
Dr. Roberts, and we'll come down.
I
this one.
just wanted to make sure that the school calendar has been updated. I hear some dates here, but it has that, the new approved calendar for the school years, has that been uploaded?
Oh, yes, it has
That
been.
reflects
It was
all
uploaded.
these changes.
Monday afternoon, I think it was uploaded with the exact date of 8:31 in terms of the start date, yes.
So I'm thinking about the schedule. I don't know who's running the presentation if you want to put it up, but I'm thinking about this one. So I can appreciate that this really mimics like the traditional school day, but I'm thinking about when I first looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, how am I doing this at my own house? I have a third grader. So, I think obviously the schedules are going to look different from grade to grade and school to school. Every school has a unique culture that they're trying to work with, and every class has different objectives. But I do think it's really important that there's a clear and consistent schedule that goes home that's essentially unchanged certainly from day to day and hopefully from week to week, just so, we're facilitating our children's learning, but also like working from home and trying to go to doctor's appointments and all of those other things. So just, making sure that that is consistent and just keeping in mind that, the flow of a school day is very different than the flow of a life day. And just making sure that, I guess, just that's taken into consideration. I was also a little surprised to see that a lot of like the school culture piece was absent from the schedules. I know it's in here for that week 1 of student learning, but where are things like morning meetings and school? I know at Wilkinson they do sleuth and those things. And so clearly academics are very important. We are a school system, but we are also growing children into humans. So to the extent that those types of socialization and just that school connection, it's really important. And so making sure that that's built into the schedule as well. Again, obviously that's different from school to school, but just making sure that time is there on a regular basis to build that community.
Absolutely. Definitely noted on the class meeting, especially with those time adjustments. To your point on the schedule for families, we spent so much time on scheduling, trying to honor all of the ends of the spectrum because we fully understand as professionals and then many of us as parents ourselves, the need for a rigid schedule that's flexible at the same time, if that makes sense. And so with the live lessons, when we met with principals, we emphasized this understanding and expectation that if my live lesson begins at 8:30, that's a schedule that was sent home to families, that's a schedule that was posted. In the same way a teacher is expected to pick a student up from related arts on time, the expectation is you begin your lesson on time. So there is no faltering on that. So families can begin to anticipate that this will happen at the exact same time every day. Where the flexibility comes in is in that asynchronous portion. We understand things happen. You might have multiple children you're attempting to support. It's not easy to work from home and educate your children from home. And so we really, really wanted to support families in that way. So with that being said, with the synchronous live lessons, some feedback that we got from some of the members of the parent council was great practices that teachers had into place so that during those live lessons, like kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, for example, designed the live lesson in such a way that the parent doesn't have to be there every single second, right? So there's not paragraphs of instructions and things like that. So that is why the day is scheduled that way. And we do know it is a lot. It's a big ask on the live lesson, but we also know that that's what our students deserve and they need that much time with their teacher. So the other side of this is the ability to record the lesson. So let's say you have to miss a lesson for some reason. It was a really key math lesson, you wanted to access it again. Those lessons can be posted later. So I hope that answers the question.
So I have take no issue with the 50-50 allocation or the minutes, like all of that. I completely appreciate and respect. My concern is around the transitions, transitioning from synchronous Mondays and Wednesdays, I may be doing one thing, Tuesdays and Thursdays another. And so those increments of time, particularly for parents who have younger learners or students who just need more support with their transitions, there's a lot of them. So just how are we making that as consistent as possible so that parents can facilitate other children's learning or do their own, work schedule?
Yeah, so what will go home in those curriculum kits and those banker boxes will be a schedule, the weekly schedule. This is just a daily schedule. So a parent will have a weekly schedule for all of their students. So with possible intervention times, things like that. Additionally, those schedules are going to be posted on the Teams pages and the websites. So that is a key point of this. And really like the beginning of all of the planning is, what does the schedule look like? How are we holding teachers accountable, students accountable for learning, beginning with the schedule. So that is a guarantee that we're working to make for every family, that if we say this is when the live lesson is every day, that's when the live lesson is every day, because we know families are working really hard to manage their schedules with the live lesson schedule. And so we do want to ensure that that is going to be consistent. It's not going to change day to day. It's not going to say, oh guys, never mind, get on in 15 minutes. If the lesson's starting at this time, then the lesson's starting at this time.
So President Rokas, quick follow-up for me so I understand. Are you suggesting that the schedule is too much? Are you suggesting that the transition between social studies and math and other blocks don't create enough time for that to occur?
So just if we're looking at like that first morning block, I have to get my child up and get ready for the day. Obviously, I would do that normally, but he would have a 45-minute synchronous lesson, and then potentially a 20-minute chunk. And so 20 minutes. So I've got 45 minutes, and then 20 minutes later, I'm back helping him transition, and then again in 25 minutes. And so that 20 to 45-minute cycle would just kind of continue throughout the day. And so there aren't
Gotcha.
longer chunks of time. And so again, I want to be really clear. I'm not suggesting there's like a, district-wide schedule or something.
No, I think we hear you. I think I understand clearly now. Just the amount of transitions that take place in the course of a day seem to be a great deal with green, yellow, blue, and gotcha. Okay, all right. We'll take that into consideration and come back.
Thank you.
Adam, I think you said you have some things.
So I just wanted to elevate just an ongoing thing, just looking through, and Dorothy brought this up multiple times. So I just want to make sure that it's heard and understood. But this is, I feel, as great as the work that you all have done, still not taking into account our special ed students, and especially the parents who have to support our special ed students. So I guess the first question I would ask is what consultation maybe, and not saying that they have all the answers, but has been done with the special school district? Do we know what they're doing, since this is what they do or what they have to do? Are there any learnings that we can take from them to be able to either support our families around special education, support our teachers around special education?
So we spent a lot of time with some of the members in SSD to just bounce ideas off one another. And so some of the feedback that came back was ensuring that we are having that constant communication with families, especially those children who are receiving those related services, OT and PT. DESE has pushed out guidance to all the districts to really follow. But the expectation is that there's regular communication from our process coordinators to families, whether they are virtual or they are in brick and mortar, as it relates to the centers. But DESE has given us some very clear guidance this year on how we stay in close communication with those families, because that is a huge lesson learned from last year. And that also pertains to our ELL families, ensuring that those translators are meeting with families, that they're communicating, that they're calling, and that they're logging these communications with families, because we were not doing that last spring.
Okay, and Dr. Adams, is it possible for us to get the DESE, what was sent over to the district from DESE on supporting special ed students?
Yeah, Desi
Yes.
has a special form that's gonna have to be followed. We'll get you a
Form G.
copy. What is it called again?
Form G.
Yeah, Form G, to make the adjustment. That's in the county, the city, statewide. But I'll get you a copy of what that looks like in terms of what they provided to us.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
My next question, so since we are at Clyde T. Miller Career Academy, so is there a focus or plan for schools like Clyde T and Gateway who have different types of programs? So if we have, a culinary program that's difficult to do virtually, have any considerations been made for, our schools that have different offerings that are more in person?
Yes, Beaumont, Clyde C. Miller, Gateway, Dr. Bender, who is responsible for this effort, is working to make sure that there are opportunities virtually for kids to continue to do the same kind of work. But we've had those conversations. There is a plan to address it. We didn't bring an example of that. We could easily provide that to you as well. But they still will be doing some of the same kind of work. Obviously, they won't be cooking in the cafeteria. I mean, in the kitchen as they normally will. But there are assignments that are tied to CTE requirements that kids can still do virtually. So the answer is yes, and we'll get you an example of that as well to give you a model. We discussed that at length last Monday.
Yes.
For me to be absolutely sure that we were covering all of those details, because you're right, it was an area that we were concerned about, as well as Griscom, our juvenile facility, as well as ICA, all of those special populations we are looking to cover, and we can get you some examples of what they will be doing in detail.
I'd just like to follow up on that special ed question very quickly, Dr. Knight. You mentioned increased communication with our special populations.
Yes.
And how do we ensure compliance to those special needs that they've been identified?
Sure.
Are we going to try to work with the ICC centers to accommodate the compliance piece? The IEPs have a compliance piece.
So
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean by ICC.
I think she's
We're
referring to the
instituting some
instructional
instructional
support center.
care centers. Will it be possible to
ISCs, Instructional Support Centers?
support centers?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, thank you.
And I'll give an update in my presentation. We've had about 2,300 kids who indicated they want to participate. A large percent of those students are special ed at ELL, and they will be available to support those students if the parents want them to go there. So yes, it is our intent. Again, these are like after-school programs, so we're going to try to provide as much service as we can, but this is not necessarily us following their IEP. There will be a teacher of record providing instruction to them. The support center will be there for tutors and ICAs and other persons to provide some support while the kid is there.
Okay, so my follow-up question is to stay providing waivers around that compliance piece?
No. The state is not providing waivers. We still have to provide what's in the student's IEP.
yes,
And we have to give compensatory time
that's right.
for anything that the kid does not get, similar to what happens in the fall. I'm sorry, in the spring. So if a kid doesn't get OT and PT, those hours continue. When the kid ever gets back into school, we have to make up those hours.
I have a couple of questions, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know, when it comes down to the lesson plans, will they just be in English, or will there be an opportunity to have several languages available? Because we do have students that are English challenged. And my second one is, how many outreach centers do we currently have, or will we have?
Are you talking about the ISCs?
Pardon me?
You talking about instructional support centers? Outreach centers?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'll give a presentation in about 5 minutes when she finishes, and I'm gonna walk you through everything. It's on the last slide in the document that says St. Louis Public School Restart Plan Update, and I'll cover it in a few minutes.
Ms.
Thank you.
Jones, to answer your question around the ELL support, so we have leaned more into our translators. And you will continue to hear me talk about lessons learned, because there was a lot of lessons learned from how we had to pivot to virtual. And one of the challenges that we face and that our families face is that we were not translating the documents or translating the support quite as fast as we should have or as frequently. So that is something that we have leaned more into the translators this year.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a question. I think it's kind of a combination of curriculum and virtual. So the PD calendar, it sounds like we're very clearly communicating the expectations around technology and the curriculum is being posted online, and that's all very clear to me. So are individual teachers then adapting the curriculum for their class, or is there like a district-wide virtual lesson for each of these standards? How is that? Can you talk to me about how I feel like the what of the curriculum is really clearly defined, but like not the how of what students are actually receiving virtually. So how are we taking what teachers did last year or any other year, the hands-on in-class component, and translating that into virtual? Is that by each individual teacher?
So the lesson planning document that Natasha Mitchell shared is been developed. Actually, the final document is approved and it's very clear guidance. It's directly linked to the standards-based curriculum plan, and it guides teachers in how to basically implant directly from the standards-based curriculum plan to that standards-based instructional weekly planner. And so teachers do have some autonomy around how they deliver that standards-based instruction. However, all of the resources have been curated for them. So they can use the curated resource, or they can work with their school level administrator and AIC to have other resources approved and use those to deliver instruction.
And then so I guess the answer is yes, every individual teacher is doing it, and then those will be monitored through those feedback coaching cycles.
Yes.
That you're talking about. So then what opportunities or process exists across the district then for the collaboration? You mentioned that there are going to be some online resources or ways for collaboration. Could you talk more about that?
So they're online through Teams, they're collaborative spaces by content and grade level. So in the grade level and content teams, there are collaborative spaces for teachers. The curriculum and instruction team is also coordinating with Sarah Martins, the coach coordinator, to develop a lesson plan database. So as we move forward with this, we are working with AICs because they will be vetting those lesson plans to curate really top-notch lesson plans, those stellar lesson plans, into a database so that our teachers can access them and use them in their own classrooms across the district.
Okay. So then the second week of PD is essentially lesson work time for teachers to be doing that, or will they have other responsibilities during those two, or that second week?
The second week is work time, yes.
It's all, so they don't have other, it's essentially all, I just want to make sure we are giving teachers enough time to put into place this robust professional development. So all the skills that they're learning in that first week, are they having enough time to put those skills into practice so that on day one, everybody is ready to go with a really great virtual learning program? So
yes. Yes.
Okay.
The second week is work time, and curriculum specialists and curriculum department support, they will be available through virtual office hours, some scheduled and some open.
Okay, great. There are other, that looks like it.
And I just wanted to add to what Dr. Moody said. Remember that last day of train, that day 5, that entire day is locked into teacher schedule. It says blended learning lesson plan and virtual platform upload, I think. Those 2 sessions, it's essentially guided work time, but the expectation is that teachers just simply have that time to work. So that full day, and then the second half of the calendar reflects more of a traditional calendar. So there are some site-based days that the principal will have with staff. They do have prep time in their classroom, but the reality is, some of their classroom prep time is going to be around prep and the virtual learning. additionally, in each session, work time is naturally built in because we understand that we cannot expect this from teachers without giving them the time and space to plan and plan well. And so we are really intentional about building that into the schedule because we do have the expectation that they have that week 1 content uploaded the week prior.
Right. So do you have is there a percentage of what you expect that second week to look like as far as just kind of like free lesson planning, what would normally be a classroom day versus site-based, principal-led or network superintendent-led professional development?
So on the calendar, it does say what that is. Day 5 is what we locked in as the academic office for planning, in addition to their 2 days. The other thing that you'll see is those action item due dates. So with the understanding that principals will give teachers time to work through those action item due dates.
So then the second week, there's only one day that's listed as classroom prep.
Yes, and then that Monday as well. So the first Monday on the 17th.
So they have one day of guided kind of lesson building and then 2 days, and they're doing a whole week of lessons by August 31st. That feels really tight to me. Just
Okay. Sorority Collins, so you're recommend, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on what you're recommending or suggesting.
it to me feel, and maybe I'm unclear on what this site-based PD consists of. I just want to make sure that teachers have enough time to, particularly thinking about what Adam was saying, some of these teachers are first-year teachers who have never taught any lesson. So now there isn't, this wealth of information out there on how to teach, chemistry virtually. So particularly thinking of newer teachers, but all teachers, how much time are they going to have to take a lesson, to unpack the standards, create a lesson virtually, and then put it all into the technology? And if there's only, that first day on the 17th, they haven't had the PD yet. So they've got essentially 2 days. Well, they have the 21st, which is the guided work time. And then it looks like
so what we can
just one more.
Okay, so what we can do is look at that second week because on the schedule, it does say site-based, and I think you did mention network. So we can certainly, and Dr. Adams met with the elementary principals today. And so we're probably going to have to look at that second week because I'm sure some feedback did come back regarding allowing an additional day of planning. So let us go back and look at that week of the 24th.
Right. I want to make sure that we
There's plenty of time.
Are ready to go on day 1 in a way that just really engages our families.
That's fair.
Because I don't want to, we're looking at enrollment changes and I don't want to lose anybody because we're not ready to go.
That's fair.
So part of what has not been talked about a little bit here is, while you're correct, we want to hit the ball out of the park on the first day, we are insisting that teachers are going to spend some time, and Mr. Brown has worked on the trauma component as well, because kids have not been in school for a long period of time. So while academics will be a driver, it will likely not be the highest driver on the first day of school. It's about really building relationships with kids. And so the social emotional piece, as well as the ABAR piece that was already mentioned as a result of the kind of social justice challenges that our nation has gone through, will also be addressed in that first week of school. So academics will be important, but we also are enforcing or strongly putting in place some components that teachers are talking about those things and addressing their social emotional piece. Megan Marietta has worked on a plan for what that looks like. So it is highly likely that academics will not be the first thing that we talk about on the first day. It's really about building relationships and finding out where kids were and all of those kinds of things. And so the academic piece is important. We'll go back and kind of look at making sure teachers have enough time, but that other piece around the social emotional piece, as well as the notion around what is happening in our country, needs to be owned as well and talked about the first couple of days of school as well.
No, I completely agree, 1,000,000%, totally appreciate that. I think that was, one of my concerns, just looking at some of this before, there isn't enough of that human connection piece. So then that first week, Is that, you said Ms. Marietta put some things together, so that will essentially be like district, teachers aren't expected to create that curriculum as well. So then that they will have some more time
That is
at
correct.
that point. So,
That is correct.
okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions for Dr. Knight or Ms. Mitchell or Dr. Moody?
I want to thank the board for the feedback and the suggestions. Thank the team for your presentation tonight. We'll come back and give you some updates around the things that you mentioned in terms of the transition, around special needs, and also around the calendar, and also the other kind of recommendations that have been made tonight. The team has taken a leave of those recommendations, and we'll come back and give you some feedback on the 25th at the work session where we are with that. There's one final presentation tonight, which is the restart plan update. My intent tonight is to just give the board an update of where we are. Obviously, the board has seen and heard about the presentation, and so I want to kind of give the board an update about where we are. Again, the committee was put together, 10 guiding principles. Safety is number one. One of the reasons why we pivoted to 100% virtual, but it kind of lays out what the guiding principles are that we look at on a regular basis to make sure that we are following these principles as we try to address the needs of our community and our students. As you know, we pivoted to 100% virtual. 67% of the students, parents rather, indicated that they wanted virtual. One was the Admendum program, one is the virtual at home, and about 33% of our families indicated in personal. That was about 5,700 students. As a result of that, we pivoted to looking at ISCs, and I'll give you some data around the ISCs. But at this point in time, as you know, 100% of our district is virtual at this point in time. But in the intent to support those families who wanted wanted the in-person, we pivoted to looking at the ISCs. And the data right now, Mr. Lane asked this question, and we are looking to get one-to-one technologists for every single kid. As a result of that, all of the technologists come in. We've received about 2,500 of the laptops right now. I think the schedule will come in this week for the rest of them, but we will have all of the technology that we need. We are struggling just a little bit with kids who had technology during the March time, returning some of that technology. We have about 4,000 units still outstanding that are still coming in on a regular basis. But even with that, we think we have enough technology. Well, we know we have enough technology to turnkey, giving every single kid a piece of technology, or at least iPad or the Dell computer. One of the challenges will be if families do not return the computers, they will not have an opportunity to get another one. And so I just want to make the board aware of that. They will likely get paper and pencil for the first few weeks of school until that technology comes back, but you will not get another piece of technology until the technology comes in. And we're working aggressively to get all of that in. I think at this time, there's only been about 12 to 13 pieces of equipment that have been lost or stolen, and police reports and those kinds of things have been done. Most of the technology is still in home. Some kids are in summer school, and there are a number of kids that are still using it, and it's due back on Friday. And at that point in time, once we re-image it, they'll get another piece of equipment when it's time to deploy that equipment. Instructional support centers. The bottom line is we're looking at about 20 sites, and I'll give you the exact number of sites. So you have a handout on the back of the slide that indicates 150 students, 10 students per class at this point in time. So this is the breakdown. 5,741 students said that they wanted to be in person. Of that number, when we check with all of the families, 42%, or roughly 2,433 families indicated they're willing to come to a site to get support. That is what the numbers say right now. Of that numbers, 19% were high school students, that's around 436. Middle school students were around 396, and high school students, elementary students around 1,600. So at this point in time, that's what the numbers are telling us, are persons who want to come to a building all day to get support. On your sheet, I've actually put the names of schools that we're looking at. On this sheet, there are no names of schools because we're still looking at the numbers. And so you have that number that's not official yet because we're working with partners like Arches and YMCA. If they're already providing services at a school, they are willing to push in to provide before and after school services and all day services in some case. And it's our intent working with the union to identify some of our support staff that will not be in that in the capacity that we talked about, Mr. Lane, in terms of supporting a teacher to be leveraged to support these sites. We're cognizant of the fact that that we're asking our staff to work in an environment with students, but we will likely, after working with the union, come up with a strategy around how to identify staff to do that. But at this point in time, we're looking at about 2,300 students, and we're looking at about 18 sites. We're determining right now if we're going to do high school students. Many of the high school students seem to be special needs high school students or ELL high school students. Those we're going to commit to supporting. But there's some students that are not high need. And so we're determining if we're going to open up a high school site. We'll make some decision about that by tomorrow. But over the next 2 or 3 days, we will determine if we're going to open up a high school site. But we're definitely opening up middle school sites and elementary sites based on the numbers. We will be communicating with parents over the next 2 or 3 days to tell them where bus stops are and what the sites are. But no one knows what the sites are right now but you on a tentative level, because you have that list that I provided in a PowerPoint, because we're still working on the sites right now based on the partnerships that we need to create. We're still going to follow all of the guidelines in terms of persons coming in that building, masks, checking their temperatures, all of the kinds of things that we will do if we were back in school. So the precautions that we put in place from the health department will still be the same kind of precautions that we're going to do at the ISCs. Facilities, you got a list tonight of all of the purchases that we made. I think it's about $751,000 of purchases for equipment to make sure our buildings are clean and all of those kinds of things, in addition to putting additional custodians in these buildings and taking care of all of the disinfecting and all of those kinds of things that you see on the screen. So questions that the board might have. I know I went rather quickly regarding ISCs, but the intent here is that we're going virtual. We are looking at those families, to 35% or 33% that said that they wanted to. We asked them, called them, and of that number, about 2,300 are indicating they wanted to participate in ISCs. And our next step now is to notify them of transportation and to let them know what the sites are. Questions that the board might have?
I have a question, Dr. Adams.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know when we initially got the document, there were 10 sites, and so now it's gone to 20. And I know that we have an increase as relates to like the responses that we got. So was that the sole decision or catalyst for us getting more school sites, or what else contributed to that decision?
So we were always doing it based on numbers. And so I'm not sure what sheet you're looking at, but on the last sheet should have about 18 sites.
Okay, I think on the last one it was 10, but I could be wrong.
Okay. So the numbers that are, if there were only 10, that was the error. We were always looking at about 18 based upon the numbers. The numbers may go down and it will go up, but the numbers may go down because once we tell families that your child is going to be getting services at XYZ site, they may say, no, I don't want to go to that site. And so that's why we are cautious about saying what the numbers look like right now, because they may pull out. All of our early childhood kids, meaning kids 3 and 4 years old, and we're debating about 3-year-olds, but 4-year-olds will likely be going to Sticks or Wilkinson all together for their support right now. And at this point in time, we have a lot of our partners who are willing to do before school care, after school care, and also to come in and provide art and music and other kinds of things. Arches, YMCA, Big Brothers and Big Sisters, many of them want to come to the table to provide some support. So those are the details that we have to work out.
Okay, and my last, and thank you, Dr. Adams. My last question is the decision completely off the table for teachers that, are really afraid to come into work?
At this point in time, there were 56 teachers who indicated that they did not want to come in for professional development. Everybody has made a commitment to come back to work because there are no kids there now. And so we're going 100% virtual. If my numbers are correct, there were 56 teachers who indicated that they had some issue with coming to professional development. We have worked out, I think at this point in time, and I have a 7:30 meeting tomorrow morning with Mr. Burton and Mrs. Major to finalize what the plan is to support those teachers. But in every single case, the intent is that teachers are coming in a building, whether it's our building or central office building, to go online and do the professional development that they need. They still have to come to a building to do the professional development. We're going to take the precautions around making sure that masks are there, or they have the screens and or gloves and all of those kinds of things. But at this point in time, every single teacher of the 56, we think we have a strategy for them to come in a building and get the professional development.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Adams.
Any other questions?
I do. I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So once you find someone has COVID in your building when school starts, will you shut the whole building down?
No, ma'am. At this point in time, the contact tracing that takes place from the health department, we're getting some of our staff contact trace training as well. The health department, I'll give you an example. We had somebody in our building 2 days ago that indicated that they had the virus. The health department did contact tracing, had the persons who were in close contact with that person to quarantine for 24 hours after they did the contact tracing, then allowed the staff to come back. It's based on a case-by-case basis. If persons have worn masks like we're doing 24/7, then they normally allow persons to come back as when persons who don't have masks. So the health department gives us directions specifically to say, yes, quarantine, yes, shut it down, yes, do this, yes, do that. So they give us guidance on terms of what to do. So we don't automatically shut down the facility. No, ma'am.
Okay, so when you're selecting staff for these various schools, because some people might have issues with their health, how are you going about weeding or selecting these people? Because some people might not make it.
So for the ISCs, I am going to be working with the union to come up with a strategy of how we select or give persons options to work in those buildings. So at this point in time, we have not worked out a quote unquote selection process for how persons are going to be working in the ISCs. It has not been done yet.
Okay, so the selection process is not mandatory, it's voluntary.
Again, it has not been worked out mandatory or voluntary. We haven't indicated yet how we're going to staff the ISCs using our district staff. We're trying to leverage our outside partners to provide assistance in those locations, number one. Number two, the intent is that either they supplement us or we supplement them, depending on what the need is in that particular facility. So I want to be very careful because we haven't come up with a strategy yet, and I don't want to say something that has not been discussed with Local 420 yet. I want to be really careful because we're still in the process of talking about how we are going to support students in this particular facility, and I don't want to cross any lines in terms of my negotiations or conversation with Mr. Cummings.
And we still haven't had a conversation about the transportation or the responsibility of the bus company.
Not at this point in time, we understand that the bus company will be willing to transport those students to the ISCs at this point in time. We haven't given them the information at the addresses, but the preliminary conversation with them was that yes, they are willing to participate to assist in terms of transporting kids to whatever location we ask them to transport them to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Dr. Adams, for those families who have indicated they want to come to brick and mortar to our ISC centers, when can you provide the details so that they can begin to plan?
Thursday. The intent is I have a staff meeting at 8 o'clock on Thursday. We're going to finalize all the plans at that point in time. It is my hope that by the end of the day, Thursday, no later than Friday, they'll have the information. We'll also have some preliminary bus information for them on Monday. I want to be careful here because the focus of what we're doing is really virtual education to kids. The ISCs are support centers. And so the kid is still going to get virtual instruction online from a dedicated teacher. The ISCs are really support centers and are not meant to supersede the relationship that the student has with the home-based school. This is a site where the student could get additional extra help and support. So I want to be careful around that piece because I don't want the ISCs to become the be all and end all. They're simply like an after school program, but they're all day after school program, if you will, to kind of support kids.
So that's the clarity that I wanted you to lean into so that families understand that it's a support service center
It is not the primary, it's not
and
primary
virtual is
instruction.
the primary.
There is not primary instruction. It's just like after school, but it's all day after school, Monday through Friday, picked up by a bus, provided food, breakfast and lunch. In addition to that, any kind of support from tutoring, from partners, arches, YMCA, Big Brothers, whoever that might be, a Little Bit Foundation. The intent would be that they might have staff to support kids in that facility. And to your point, Ms. Jones, we don't use any staff. I doubt that that's going to happen, but the intent is that there may be staff that we are not utilizing in that one-to-one relationship, because in some buildings, I have 29 support people. 29 support people. My highest number, I think, is 29 support people, and I don't have 29 teachers because of ISS, ICAs, in-school suspension, PBIS, restorative justice. That a large number of persons, even if I give every teacher one support person, I still have extra persons. And as I've discussed with the board before, and I'm working with Mr. Cummings, my intent is not to lay anybody off, but to try to make sure that we're utilizing people, and that may be the place where some of the ISC people might be assigned to go. But it will be on a case-by-case basis after having some detailed conversation with the local union about how to do that in an equitable kind of way, in a fair way, and also addressing the issue of any kind of health concerns that employees might have. So the intent is not to force anybody to do anything at this point in time.
I had one more question about this last program, the Edmonton
Yes, ma'am.
program. I looked it up and it seems that this program run by the state of Missouri?
No, ma'am.
And
No,
it's-
ma'am.
It's just individual learning. And it said that you can pay for your service on this site. So
I don't know anything about paying for service, Mr. Brown. No.
there were various vendors on there and they asked you,
You're talking about the MOCAP, I think.
yes.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing?
So I'll let Mr. Brown address the question. Yeah, could you repeat the question, Mr. Brown?
The MOCAP program, the Edmonton program. And so when I looked it up, I thought it was a program through the state of Missouri, but it had various vendors like UMSL and what have you, and it asked for payment. And I was just wondering if we provide payment or do we have to pay to have students enroll in this program since they're not going to be affiliated with St. Louis Public Schools?
So they are affiliated with, the students are affiliated with St. Louis Public Schools. They're still enrolled in our district. They're enrolled at their neighborhood schools or under 199 if they're full-time. The program is through DESE, is DESE approved. All MOCAP have to be DESE approved. So the program at Mentum is DESE approved. Our students were enrolled in the program. It's a self-guided program. It took the place of a CELUS, which was the program last year. We're mandated by Senate Bill 603 to have a virtual program in the district. And so this is the program that we were mandated by DESE to have.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it.
No problem.
If there are no other questions, thank you very much.
I have a question, Dr. Adams.
Sorry, yes, ma'am.
You've made a number of presentations about the restart plan, and at no time has the board approved your plan. And so is it appropriate that I put forth a resolution at this time?
Yes, ma'am, I think it is. In light of the fact that there's been some miscommunication, because I presented the plan at the last board meeting, and I think a reporter asked myself and the president, does the board have to approve the plan? It's not legally required to do so, but I think in light of the kind of miscommunication, I would like the board tonight to accept and approve the district or the superintendent or the Restart Task Force plan by a vote tonight. If not now, when we do the consent agenda.
Okay, so I'm willing to, because I have listened to the community, the new normal, expect us. I've sat in on teacher comments, parents, the union, and I think it's appropriate for this board to approve the restart plan that you have presented. And notwithstanding the fact that changes may be occur based on current data.
Yes, ma'am, I agree.
Dr. Roberts, are you making a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you put it in the form of a motion? So I move that.
Okay, I'm putting forth a motion that we approve the restart plan that Dr. Adams has submitted, notwithstanding the fact that there may be some changes based on data.
I'll second. Are there further questions or discussion? Ms. Bell?
Yeah,
sure, go
so
ahead.
since we are moving to approve this conditionally, it seems like, when would we come back to a final approval? And does an approval now mean that we forfeit any further approvals down the line? I think that would be important.
This approval is not to take away from anything that comes up that's unforeseen. If there's any changes that need to be made, then that's what needs to occur. But I think it says we haven't addressed the issue of approval at any time during this process.
Agreed. And thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Roberts. So this would just be an approval to move forward, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
An approval to move forward with what has been presented so far, understanding what you said, that there may be changes, will be changes and additions. Okay. That's all I got.
Ms. Bell?
Ms. D. Jones?
I'm going to abstain at this time. I'm uncomfortable with the in-person portion of it. The other parts are wonderful, but the in-person, I'm just having an issue with. Thank you.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
I have a yes with condition. In addition to looking at what we've already stated as a board to look at, I would also like some more robust information on, again, we already talked about special ed, but early childhood education as well. I feel like that's just an area that we haven't had a lot of conversation about, and I would like to get a further presentation on that. So that's a long yes, sorry.
Okay, I was just going to ask you to confirm, is that a yes, as we can't make it, the yes has to be towards the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Just want to make sure I put it out there.
Dr. Roberts?
I'm a yes to, conditioned upon the things that Adam just said as well.
I know we're in the middle of a vote. All these conditions, it's a yes or no. And so if we need to put this off until another time, until we're fully comfortable, then that's what we need to do.
Susan, I tend to agree. Conditional votes aren't actually a thing. So the vote is on the motion as it's stated by the person making the motion. So Ms. Bell, do you have that? Can you read that back to us, please?
Ms. D. Jones?
I'm sorry, could you reread the motion? Just, I think for
sorry.
clarity, so we all know what we're voting on.
The motion is to accept and approve the restart plan and accept further changes based on data as
necessary.
changes, yes.
So Adam, it sounds like you are a yes.
Can I amend the motion then?
We cannot amend the motion in the middle of a vote.
You got to withdraw it.
So I will withdraw my second. Dr. Roberts, you would have to withdraw your original motion, but actually we can't do that in the middle of a vote either. I'm sorry. So we do need 4 votes for it to move on. Currently, Donna has abstained. Adam is a yes. So Dr. Roberts, you are actively voting. Who's left, Ms. Bell?
Do we have Ms. Vowell?
Natalie's on the phone, yes, or on video.
Okay, Ms. Vowell?
That was an abstain.
And Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Were there four?
Yes, there were 4. Yes.
Susan, you voted?
Yes, I did.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got lost in the shuffle. Okay. So at this time, we would normally be doing our public comment. I will read the statement as it is on our agenda and public notice. The Board of Education is committed to receiving public comment during the COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding suspension of in-person public Board of Education meetings. As part of this effort, the board is inviting interested members of the public to submit written comments to the following email address prior to the start of the August 11th meeting. That email address is slpsinfo@slps.org. Subject to the requirements that commenters exercise proper decorum and respect for individual student and employee privacy, the Board of Education will assemble the written comments and make them available for review by the public via a link that will be placed on the district website, alongside the link for viewing rebroadcasts of the August 11th, 2020 meeting. This procedure for submitting public comments will remain in effect throughout this pandemic. So those will be posted tomorrow during the day. So at this time, we have the consent agenda. We do have, I believe, one walk-on item. I'm sorry, 2 walk-on items. So I will move that we approve the consent agenda for items 08-11-2001 through 08-11-2011. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or discussion on these first 11 items? Ms. Bell?
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones? Oh, she stepped away. Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Mrs. Bowell?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
At this time, I'll make the motion to approve 08-11-2012. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or discussion?
Madam President?
Yes.
I would like to read the motion
Sure, go
for
right
the
ahead.
public, if for no one else.
Sure.
On June 9, 2020, the board revised and approved the new policy 7P7600, which allows the board to remove the name of a school for very specific reasons. The policy states the name shall not be considered or shall be removed from district facilities if the board determines that the name, individual, group, or organization is not in compliance with the district's core beliefs and values or the terms of an agreement entered into with the district, which may include but may not be limited to conviction of or deferred adjudication for a felony of any crime involving moral turpitude as that term is interpreted by the courts, or participation in any act of discrimination, prejudice, or bias on the basis of race, color, religion, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, national origin, disability, age, immigration status, or any other basis prohibited by law. The underlying portion of the policy provides the rationale for removing the name. Obviously, Samuel M. Kennard was a Confederate soldier, and it's also a line that he was also a aide-de-camp for Nathan B. Forrest, who was a prominent Confederate Army general, acumen as a cavalry leader and military strategist. He also was the first Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard, and is being alleged to have killed some 300 African Americans during his time as a Confederate soldier. So at this point in time, I think the name needs to be removed based on the board's policy. The school will be named Classical Junior Academy Elementary School for at least 1 year while we work on a name with the parent community and bring back a name during the course of the year. The parents have worked hard over the last 3 years to bring this up. Obviously, there wasn't a policy that supported us doing so. And so the first opportunity we have is tonight to change the name of the school based upon our research. We've done some deep research around making sure that the name, at least the appointment, wasn't done as a result of any kind of requirement to keep the name in place. We've done research around that, and we feel comfortable that the name needs to be removed immediately, such that when students go back to school, on the 17th of faculty and staff and students go back on the 31st, that the name is changed.
Thank you for that context. Any further discussion or comments on this item? Ms. Bell?
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowell? Yes. Ms. Rowley Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. The remaining item is, I will move to approve 08/11/2013. Is there a second?
Second.
So I actually have a question about this. I recognize that this is our building, our district property. Is there any ability from the city, like did they share any responsibility in this, or is there any fund that we can access when these types of things come up with our real estate that is not in use?
No, ma'am, the city has no responsibility. That's our building. So we're responsible for the security of that building. There've been many break-ins over the last 30, 60 days. This is an item that we have been working on getting an RFP for, as you can see. It is my hope that the board approves it tonight and we could immediately get the building boarded up again. I want to be clear, we've spent money in the past doing this, and when we sell property, we had a prior agreement that any property we sold, 50% of those dollars will be used for repairs or securing these kind of buildings. And so it's our intent to get this approved tonight and get somebody out there to board up the building.
Great. Other questions or comments on this item? Ms. Bell?
Ms. D. Jones? Yes. Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts? Ms. Bowell?
Yes.
Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So we do have on our agenda a bylaw approval. There have been 0 changes since the last time it was presented. I've gotten 0 feedback on that. Is there a motion to approve the bylaw relating to the exception to the closed session in-person requirement? So hearing no motion, we will move on with the agenda, which are board member reports. Are there any reports from committees?
Dorothy, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No,
Would you go back to the last part about the bylaw?
Yes, so I was asking, is there a motion to approve the exception to closed session in-person requirement bylaw?
And that speaks to everyone being in person around.
With the exception, so being in person to, I'm sorry, let me start over. Being in person at closed session meetings with the exception of public health crisis, state of emergency, things of that nature. So the context for this is traditionally it has been the practice of this board that closed session meetings are in person only. This bylaw would create an exemption to that would be in effect for this pandemic, but also in the future if there are other states of emergency or public health crises as well, to allow that flexibility for closed session. But if there is no motion, without a motion in a second, there's no discussion, and we will move on with the agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, so committee reports is on here. Is there a committee that has a report? I don't, okay. Board members, I'm just going to start to my left. Dr. Roberts. Do you have a report, Dr. Roberts? I can't hear you.
No report.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Susan, do you have a report?
No report at this time.
Adam?
Yep. 2 things. One, I had the opportunity to attend an online training session with Ford through Ferguson that I was very grateful for, with a bunch of other elected officials in the region on making policies more equitable. So I hope to translate that and use it in my capacity on the board. The second thing, as school is beginning to restart, the Office of Financial Empowerment for the city and the Bayer YMCA are partnering up to have a school resource drive. So it'll be contact lists, it'll be a contactless drive-through, and they're trying to provide resources to the first 2,000 families that show up. So that's going to be this Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Bayer YMCA at 5555 Page. Just want to make sure people knew that is something that's available. And you can show up. If you want to find out more information, you can visit stlofe.org. That's it.
Thank you. Donna?
No report at this time.
Okay, so I have a couple quick updates. First, oh, I'm sorry, Natalie, I apologize. Go ahead.
That's okay. Can everyone hear me? Just real quick information, the Missouri School Boards Association Board of Directors met this past week, well, and has been meeting for the past few weeks to determine that the conference this year will be virtual. I think I sent that out into an email to all of you, but I would encourage you to take advantage of the changing curriculum. It will be available throughout the year so that you'd be able to work on your certifications or just tune in to specific sessions that you're particularly interested in. So again, you don't have to go in person to a whole conference. It's the same price to have access to those online modules. This decision was obviously made in the interest of public safety, but we don't want to end the opportunity for professional development. So that's it. Dorothy, you can paraphrase if anybody didn't hear.
Is there any need for clarity here? Were you all able to hear? Okay. So two updates. One is I spoke to the mayor yesterday regarding the board vacancy. It is her plan, I suppose, to try to have someone appointed in the next 1 to 2 weeks. I did share with her that we have a work session on the 25th, and that would be the last work session or meeting prior to the start of school, and that it was very important that we have a board member, a full board going into the school year. And I asked her to make every effort to make that appointment by that time. As a follow-up to that, I am still looking for a board member to run the governance committee. The governance committee passed with a unanimous vote, but yet I don't have a chair to that committee. One of those tasks is onboarding of board members. So knowing that we have a new board member coming on in just a matter of weeks is very important that we have a process in place to onboard that board member and also do the other work of that committee, which is to evaluate the effectiveness of ourselves as a board, our adherence to bylaws and things of that nature. So I am looking for someone. I will volunteer to be the assistant chair, but I cannot by the committee creation document, the board president cannot serve as that chair. So I need someone else to do it. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move that we adjourn.
I'll second. Ms. Bell. Oh, adjourn and move back into closed session.
Sorry.
A motion to adjourn and move back into closed session. I'm sorry,
yes.
I wasn't clear.
Motion to adjourn and move back into closed session.
And I'll second that. Thank you. Ms. Bell.
Ms. D. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. S. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Roberts?
Yes.
Ms. Bowell? Yes. Ms. Rhodey Collins?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you.